Okay. Okay. Hello. Hello, everybody. I'm Jim Cloos, General Secretary of TEPSA. I'm very pleased to be here today for this big conference. We have the Europe Minister from Denmark, so we're very pleased about that and honored. And of course, I want to thank Peter and DIIS and also the other think tank Europe. They've been working splendidly together and with us to put up a great conference. The PPC is something we do every 6 months. The idea is to bring together researchers, academics, and people who work, practitioners and politicians. So that is what we try to do. The rotating presidency is something very important in the EU system. It's the rotating presidency of the Council, of course. It's not the presidency of the EU. It's important to move things forward, and it will be particularly important in the coming months. I was telling Peter that I say this each time, but this time it really is true. Because the world is burning. We know that there are big change rooms everywhere, and so there are huge challenges. And that is why, and this is being described, and Richard is going to talk about this in the TEPSA recommendations. And that is why we have such important themes on the agenda this time. It ranges from security to green economics and all other things, very much on the external level, because that's where the challenges are biggest right now. So I will conclude by saying something which Ivan Krastyev said. There's Paul Schmidt, I had breakfast with him this morning, and he said to me, Ivan Krastyev was recently in Vienna, and he said, we are always talking about the Europeans waking up at last. And he said, that's good, but it's not enough to wake up, you have to get out of bed too. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jim. So I'll try to follow up from where Jim left and without reiterating basically everything that he said. So first and foremost, I'd like to have like a warm welcome to this 2-day conference. It's called Europe in Action, Building Security Together. And what we've tried to do here is to bring together a group of speakers and panels that will help us reflect upon the security challenges that EU is facing right now during the next 6 months, at least during the Danish presidency. So, and my name is Peter Kragelund, and I'm the director of the Danish Institute of International Studies. And as Jim said, we are co-hosting this conference with TEPSA, the Trans-European Policy Studies Association, Think Tank Europe, and then our own organization, DIIS, where this is held. And I'm really happy that we can actually have this conference here at DIIS, because this allows us to do what we really want to do all the time, is to bring people together, bring academics together with diplomats, with policymakers, with all the key stakeholders, to discuss the issues that are of great interest to all of us and are of great importance. So during today and tomorrow, we will host a number of panels discussion at DIIS and tonight at the French Embassy on issues ranging from EU enlargement, EU-Africa relations, geoeconomics, maritime security, energy security. So as Jim said, we're focusing very much today and tomorrow on the EU, but also EU's external relations during this session. So hopefully all these discussions, the panels, will enable us to enhance our common understanding of the challenges that we face, and also that both the keynote here today and the panels that we have and the breakout sessions that we have tomorrow will spark off interesting discussions, not only here, but also when you have breaks. And this also, of course, goes for this session tonight at the French Embassy. Before I give the word to Richard Young, who is a TEPSA board member, but also a senior fellow at the Democracy, Conflict and Governance program at Carnegie, and a professor of international relations at the University of Warwick, I'd like to thank the TEPSA staff, the TEPSA board, the Think Tank Europe. Thanks for co-hosting this conference with us. Thanks to all the speakers who are here already. And to the audience, a warm welcome to all of you. So, Richard, it's all yours.
Thanks to Peter and Jim. My name is Richard Young, so I work in the Carnegie Europe think tank in Brussels. I'm part of the TEPSA board. What we do in the TEPSA team every 6 months is consult a team of experts for them to give us their reflections on the presidency coming up in the next 6 months. For this 6 months, forthcoming Danish presidency, we consulted a particularly good team of experts. We have Kristi Nielsen from the think tank EUROPA here. We had Tina Karjalainen and Federica Prandin from the Finnish Institute of International Affairs and Seamus from the Institute for International and European Affairs in Dublin. They put some really excellent, thought-provoking ideas on the table for what it would take for Europe to actually get out of bed in practice. Many of the issues we've put in our 6-monthly recommendations, the presidency here, people can consult online. Many of the issues we've put on the table, as Jim was saying, are fairly obvious, will be of no surprise to anyone here, but we hope we offer a few thought-provoking ideas, suggestions, some provocations, if you will, that might guide our discussions over the next day and a half. Obviously, the overwhelming focus is on security, as Jim was saying, and particularly on Ukraine. We all know the conflict is in something of a limbo at the moment, and during the 6 months that Denmark will preside the EU, that limbo has to stop. One way or the other, it has to stop. Either there has to be some kind of putative peace deal, and Europe will have to step forward and in some form or other help enforce that deal, or there will not be a deal. And if there is not a deal, Europe will have to step forward with a qualitative upgrade in its security support to Ukraine. Our recommendations suggest Denmark is well positioned to try and marshal the EU through this challenging period. There will be more debate about this very distinctive Danish model of direct support to Ukraine. That is likely to become a lot more pertinent over the next 6 months. But we also make an additional point, which is the debate cannot just be about providing this kind of immediate security support to Ukraine. Europe needs a broader, more geopolitical vision for how Ukraine is likely to fit into the new European order that will emerge as a result of this conflict. So we suggest some interesting ideas there that might inform debate over the next day and a half. But we also make an additional point. The agenda will, unsurprisingly and rightfully, be dominated by Ukraine, but Denmark, the Danish presidency, will also have to try and ensure that other equally important conflicts are not neglected. We all know the tragedy that is unfolding in Gaza right as we speak. We all know the EU has underperformed on this issue. Denmark will have to try and conjure up some kind of working agreement within the European Union on the issue that we all know is probably the most divisive issue in the EU. This will be difficult. The foreign policy agenda is always difficult for any presidency, but I think the fact that there will be this one conflict that stands at such a defining moment, while another is reaching these depths of tragedy that the EU at the moment has got nowhere dealing with in its diplomatic relations, will be of unique challenge to the Danish presidency. The security dimension will run through all these foreign policy debates. We all know that this is the focus of Christine's contribution. Rearming Europe is necessary, is overdue. It will accelerate. The process will accelerate during the Danish presidency, but we also make an additional point, which is that there needs to be a qualitative reassessment of what European security means. That debate should not be neglected by the necessary focus on rearming. Rearming Europe is necessary but not sufficient. And here we suggest that Denmark is one of the countries that has advanced in recent years on a qualitative rethinking of what security means, non-traditional forms of security, and it will be of increasing importance to try and filter this kind of new thinking around security into the EU agenda over the next few months. Trade wars will also heat up during the next 6 months. The EU has not yet really defined a concise and coherent position on responding to the trade sphere. You all know that the EU has defined a policy of economic security, but not yet implemented this or suggested how it is to be operationalized with sufficient precision. So we argue that Denmark will have to advance this vitally important agenda and to take forward the necessary challenge of defining what kind of economic statecraft the EU is really committed to, how this economic statecraft relates to all these other issues of traditional forms of security that I've just been outlining. This trade dimension will become more acute during the next 6 months, and the presidency will be obliged to try and hammer out a more comprehensive economic security response on the part of the EU to these impending trade challenges. We suggest as an integral part of this, the EU will have to move gradually from a traditional form of transatlanticism to a more global set of partnerships. We have a session on this tomorrow, but we also suggest that so far the EU's approach to building these global partnerships has been a little bit lacking in really significant game-changing substance. And what the EU will not gain much by is simply signing lots of new partnerships with global powers around the world that do not actually bring new substance to the table. That's our provocation that perhaps our panelists would like to pick up and debate tomorrow. We have a significant contribution in our recommendations from Seamus on tech sovereignty. We all know the tech sovereignty agenda is one on which the EU has certainly progressed over the last 6 months or year. It's an area where the EU really counts. The weight of EU tech regulations undoubtedly imbues the EU with a significant amount of power in international relations. But we suggest that the EU has not yet struck the right kind of balance, and that the EU needs, during the next 6 months, under Denmark's leadership, needs both to avoid the tech sovereignty agenda leading to too much centralization of European regulatory powers, but also to avoid too much deregulation that would take away from the EU the essential source of power that it has through its regulations, and how these are capable of constraining the behavior of the big international tech platforms. A very difficult balancing act to strike, but one that is necessary if the EU is to get this emerging tech sovereignty agenda absolutely right. Underpinning all this, we make the point that at a more mundane level, the Danish presidency will be immersed in the negotiations over the new budget, the multi-annual financial framework. This is where we get into the real nitty-gritty of EU negotiations. Fairly mundane, fairly arcane, fairly technical, but we argue that what is lacking at the moment is a kind of overall vision to structure these nitty-gritty budget negotiations. And that's where we think the presidency could add some kind of valuable input. Which leads me on to the last point, the last issue that we look at in detail in our recommendations, and that is the climate agenda. We make the point here that for obvious reasons, Denmark should be fairly well positioned to try and get the climate agenda back on track, because this is the policy area where I think the EU has slipped backwards in a most pronounced fashion over the last 6 months. We all know there is this growing backlash against the climate agenda, and this calls not just for the presidency to try and push forward to get the EU back on track with its climate targets, the 2035, 2050 targets that the EU has delayed at the moment, but also to do something of even greater importance, which is to ensure that the climate agenda is much more centrally mainstreamed into the way that the EU does security, the way it defines security, the way it defines its social and economic policies. For all the EU's progress on the climate agenda, we argue that that is not sufficiently advanced so far, and it's these social aspects of the climate agenda in particular that need to be looked at in a more systematic fashion if the emerging backlash against the climate agenda is to be overcome. So I leave it there. As I say, most of those issues will come of no surprise to anyone. They're fairly obviously priority issues during the next 6 months, but we try and to suggest some ways in which Denmark might contribute towards fine-tuning and adding new kinds of ideas to the agenda. Each 6 months, when we issue these recommendations, we ask one underlying question, which is whether the upcoming government taking on the presidency has particular advantages or disadvantages in running the presidency over the 6 months. And we do the same with Denmark. Denmark is clearly well positioned on some of these policy dossiers, security, climate and the like, but Denmark, like any country, also has some disadvantages and some challenges in running the EU over the next 6 months. On some of these agenda items, Denmark is seen as having positions that have perhaps not been completely mainstream within the EU, have engendered some opposition and pushback from other member states. So it will be a challenge for Denmark to hold some of its traditional positions, but at the same time to conjure up and articulate positive consensus with other member states. So it will be challenging. And in particular with this, as I leave this as a concluding thought, that underlying all these individual policy challenges, there is something structural happening to the European project at the moment. The accumulation of all these security and climate and economic and political challenges is that there are growing calls for a fundamental rethink and reform of the European project. This is way beyond the Danish presidency to try and resolve this kind of underlying existential challenge, but this will be an issue that runs like a thread through all of these policy issues over the next 6 months. We often repeat ourselves in these recommendations because we always make the point that the next 6-month presidency is likely to be very, very challenging. Every presidency is challenging. Every presidency has to deal with these acutely difficult challenges. But there does seem to be something different about this presidency in the next 6 months because we have all these individual policy challenges crowding in on the European agenda, but underlying them is this more existential and structural issue about where the European project is actually going as it confronts this unique constellation of external and internal challenges. And I think that it's if one were a government and choosing a time to run the European presidency, this would not be the 6 months you would choose.
Perhaps, am I on? Please stay on because we will have a few minutes. Am I right? My name is Cecilie, Felicia, Stockholm Bank. I'm the head of Foreign Policy and Diplomacy unit here. I'm going to be with you during the whole day, kind of making sure that everything is smoothly operated. And then also I will be chairing the panel on enlargement. We are waiting for the Danish Minister, Europe Minister, Marie Bjerre. So while we are waiting, may I ask you this question? That's why I wanted to keep you here.
I definitely didn't sign up for this, but we have the authors here. Perhaps they would like to add or embellish anything I've said.
Please. We have these recommendations. I think they have been. You have the recommendations that have been distributed. They are distributed, right? But you mentioned you have so many great expectations to the Danish presidency. Can you just, if you ought to prioritize, which one is your biggest, your most important expectation? This is the one that you would focus on, where you have,
I think I said that at the beginning, Ukraine.
Right, that's Ukraine, right.
But please, there's other authors here, they might want to come in.
Well, maybe not. Please, if you have a question to Richard while we wait, yes.
Thank you. Hi, Ian Bond from the Centre for European Reform. There's one thing that you didn't explicitly mention, Richard, and I don't know whether that's deliberate or not. But that is the challenge of transatlantic relations. I mean, except in the trade context, but beyond trade, the relationship with the United States is going to be extremely difficult over the next 6 months, and I wondered whether you'd had any reflections on how the Danish presidency, together with the External Action Service and the High Rep and so on, might manage that.
Thanks, Ian. No, it's a fair point. I think the minister's coming in, but only, as I say, we have to get away from this prism of kind of traditional transatlanticism to building up global partnerships. But I think our argument would be that it's important for the EU to build up these alternative partnerships, but they're not going to be a panacea or a complete replacement. I'm not sure how far the presidency can plan ahead, because as we know, the policies coming out of the US are so fluctuating and uncertain and confusing and alarming at the moment that it will certainly be a test for the EU's ability to react in an agile way to these changing power relations. I know you've been writing about this in CEO. It seems to me the EU needs to keep at least some select parts of the transatlantic relationship.
Okay. Jeg kan ikke mærke noget.
Thank you so much.
Nej, jeg tror måske, den spænder så meget ind i siden.
It's because the mic is on. Please.
Well, I think the point, Ian, would be that not to consign the transatlantic relationship to complete irrelevance, but to try and reframe it. So it will undoubtedly be an important element of EU foreign relations, but it won't be perhaps quite the same kind of systemic bedrock as it's been in previous decades. So I think it's a good point. And I think for me, Ian, the key is that there won't be a kind of separate transatlantic debate, but the transatlantic tensions will pervade all these other areas that we've mentioned.
Thank you so much, and thank you again. Richard, please have a seat. We will now welcome the Marie Bjerre, Danish Minister of European Affairs, if they are ready. Are you? Yeah, slightly, she says. Please open the door. Are you done? Are you? No, not yet. So what am I? I can't. Okay, maybe I should just mention that we were following Marie Bjerre's keynote. We were to have the Ukrainian Deputy Prime Minister for European and Euro-Atlantic Integration and Minister of Justice, Olha Stefanishyna. She was supposed to be with us online. Unfortunately, she could not make it. She sent her regrets yesterday afternoon. The minister has an unplanned and urgent visit to Brussels, where she will be attending a high-level meeting with senior EU officials, which of course is good. Instead, we will have Director General of the Government Office for the Coordination of European EU-Atlantic Integration, Oleksandr Ilkov. So now I think Marie Bjerre is here.
Hello. Hi. Thank you. Hi.
I'm Cecilie Banke from DIIS.
Good to be here.
Yes,
Thank you very
absolutely.
much. Thank you.
Please, we've been waiting for you.
Okay.
And you're ready with the mic and everything.
Did I go through with the mic out there? So, okay. Okay, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Okay, but I see some of you don't understand Danish, so with half of you, I'm okay. And how is the sound? Is that? I think it's a little. Yeah.
But you look good.
Okay. Is it better now? It's much better now. Okay, good. No, it's a little weird. What do I do? It's okay? No? Okay, it's good for you. Okay, good. Well, if it's good for you, it's good for me. Hello everyone, I'm very happy to be here. Jeg synes altså, den er altså lidt mærkelig. Okay, I'm gonna try again. Is it? It's much better. Otherwise, I can take it off. Is that better? Oh, on the live stream. Okay. I don't want to sound like I'm an angry person. I'm not. Okay, good. I'm gonna try. Thank you very much for inviting me here today. I'm very happy to be here. And I want to start out by saying that 2 years ago, Denmark celebrated our 50 years as a member of the European Union. It was for us back then an opportunity to look back on our European history from a Danish perspective. When Denmark joined in 1973, Europe was, just like today, facing multiple crises. Some of them economic, some of them related to energy supply, and some stemming from security threats. Today, Europe is confronted with similar challenges. But since the 17th, the EU has overcome a number of big crises and come out stronger on the other side. The financial crisis and the debt crisis, the migration crisis, Brexit, the COVID pandemic, Russia's war in Ukraine, and the subsequent energy crisis are all examples of this. We managed to adjust to new times. Even at the most difficult moment, we learned that Europe can come together and strengthen our commitments. Now, the time has come to do that again. Europe faces greater challenges and more serious threats to our common security than ever before. And it is in light of this that the 8th Danish presidency will find its purpose and agenda. Therefore, I would like to present to you some of the key areas that the Danish presidency will focus on. As you might expect, it concerns European security and defense, as well as competitiveness and the green transition. During the last few years, the world as we knew it has changed. Russia's war in Ukraine has brought back war on European soil. The Europe of peace and stability that we know has crumbled. The fear of further Russian aggression is very present. Europe must once again prepare for uncertainty and unrest. Luckily, European leaders have shown immense willingness to move ahead together and find common solutions that make Europe stronger and safer while supporting Ukraine. It has become clear that the European Union must be able to handle its own security. We cannot rely on others to do so. Therefore, we have to invest heavily in our defense. For the last few years, we have already seen substantial growth in European defense budgets and increased willingness to create common solutions within EU. That has to continue. The Commission's initiatives on defense, like the rearmed Europe plan, sets the right direction. Now, rapid and effective execution is vital. It is important that we get all member states on board. This is crucial if we want Europe to be able to defend itself in 2030 at the latest. We need to strengthen the European defense industry through development, procurement, and production of common defense products. We are stronger together. We should draw inspiration from our efforts in vaccine production during the COVID pandemic. We must strengthen our preparedness and protect our critical infrastructure. Denmark is now fully taking part in these discussions. That has not always been the case. We know that. In 1993, after a failing referendum, we got 4 opt-outs, 4 policy areas where Denmark is abstaining from participating in the EU. One of them on defense. But things changed after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and after only 4 months of war on the European continent, the Danish population overwhelmingly said yes to abolish the defense opt-out. It was an important decision. Now Denmark, along with many member states, has greatly increased its defense spending. We can and must do more for our common security in Europe. The Danish presidency will move Europe forward on this agenda to realize our shared ambitions on defense, peace, and democracy. It is also crucial that EU and its member states collectively increase their military support to Ukraine. Denmark is doing our part, and we are encouraging others to do theirs as well. When we talk about security and stability, enlarging the EU also plays a crucial role. A larger EU is a stronger EU, and we have to do it right. The Danish presidency would put all its efforts into moving the candidate countries closer to the EU, not least Ukraine. It will not be easy. We all know the obstacles in front of us, but we will try to find solutions. Through all these efforts, we will once again show that Europe can handle major challenges and disruptions on our continent. Now let me move on to a related and important focus point for the Danish presidency: the European competitiveness. The strength of the European Union is based on its economy. Today, Europe remains the largest trading bloc in the world, but our position in the world is gradually declining. We have all read the Mario Draghi report on European competitiveness. His conclusions are as clear as they are worrisome. Europe is a continent with a highly educated and well-paid labor force, but our productivity level is too low. Draghi's report underlines the fact that we are falling behind the US and China, especially when it comes to innovation. Small and fragile startups are finding it difficult to attract the necessary capital to grow, and European businesses are burdened by unnecessary detailed regulation. On top of that, new US tariffs are changing the economy of world order as we know it. Now is the time to act. And we will deliver great results under the Danish EU Presidency. We will improve investments in development of new technologies, create protection measures for strategically important industries, and reduce unnecessary burdens on European businesses. It is crucial if we want to keep our economy position in the world. We will do all this while sticking to our high ambitions and goals when it comes to the green transition. Delivering on the climate neutrality agenda remains an important goal for us. In my view, green transition and competitiveness goes hand in hand. The green transition is an opportunity to boost the European economy, competitiveness, security, and ultimately our strategic autonomy. Needless to say, we have our work cut out for us. The 1st of July, Denmark assumes the presidency. A successful Danish presidency would be one that is not afraid of facing the common challenges and strive to achieve progress in the important agendas. That is what we will be fighting for during our 6 months leading the Council. So since Denmark joined the European Union 52 years ago, the Union has faced a number of big crises. It seems, however, to be exactly in the time of crisis that our European family comes together and grow stronger. I have faith that we can do that again, if we make the right political decisions and show courage. Looking at Europe today, I don't see hopelessness and despair. I see a potential road to European greatness. Europe's challenges are substantial, but our potential is much greater. And if we handle our challenges the right way, I believe we will come out much stronger. I truly believe Europe has a much bigger role to play in the world. That is what the Danish presidency should help along, and that is what I will work tirelessly for the next 7 months. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marie. Do we have time for some questions? We have about like 5 minutes. Okay. Please come forward. This is your chance. The moment you can actually pose a question to the Danish minister, to Marie. Bjerre, please. And please also introduce yourself. So the minister recognize the crowd. She's
Thank you very much, Minister. This is Ilkov, Director of Global Policy Center, a research institute based in Madrid. Thank you very much also for the positive tone. It's great that you're going to aim for European greatness. I wanted to ask a clarification question. What do you exactly mean when you say at the latest 2030, Europe will defend itself alone? So what does that mean? How can we unpack this? It means no procurement from third countries. It means not necessarily a nuclear umbrella from the United States. It means another European security structure. What do you mean in that case? I would be very happy to hear your thoughts. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Well, it means a lot of things. We have to be able to defend ourselves in 2030. We are not capable of doing that today. Today, we need help from the US. There are a lot of capabilities that we do not have in Europe. We cannot protect our own continent. It goes to defense resources, defense equipment. We are not capable of doing that. And it's quite ironically, because we are 450 million people, and we are the world's second largest spender on defense. Only US spend more than us. But it doesn't correspond to what we are actually capable of doing, because we are way too fragmented. So when we say we have to be able to defend ourselves in 2030, that means if there is an attack on a European soil, we should be able to defend the soil without asking for help from outside. We need to have these capabilities within ourselves, meaning that we have to produce more weapons inside of Europe ourselves and work together ourselves. Of course, we will continue to have a good cooperation in NATO. NATO keeps being the best alliance, but it's not an opposition. We can do both, and we should.
I think we would have time. Thank you so much for another question. I had several over here, but please.
Hello, my name is Paul Schmidt from the Austrian Society for European Politics. Minister, thank you very much for your positive energy. Let me ask you the following question. You have mentioned the 4 opt-outs that Denmark used to have, now 3 left.
Oh no, where's this going?
So I have to continue. I mean, in the light of strategic independence and moving ever closer together, what do you think about the remaining 3 opt-outs? Maybe pick one, the euro.
Well, I personally, and my party as well, we think that we should get rid of the opt-outs. In principle, we should get rid of the opt-outs. We have to engage fully in the EU. This is a stand we always had. We have always been arguing for that, and we continue to argue for that. We think that we should be in the euro. It will also be a strength for Europe. And to be together in EU is not just about what you gain as a national country. It is about that we are stronger together. I think we should be a part of the euro. There are many reasons for that. There are also reasons why we shouldn't join. I know that a lot of our Danish economists would say it's not good for Denmark to join the EU. However, this is also politically. We think we should join. Then we have the opt-out on legal affairs, judiciary affairs. We did have a referendum on that only 10 years ago. And it was actually a quite good deal that the EU was willing to give us. They were willing to give us instead of having an opt-out, an opt-in. So we could just choose what to be in. For instance, we really want to join the Europol, which is a big obstacle for us that we are not a part of that. But other areas we don't like that much. We could just say, okay, we don't want that. But even that, the Danish population did not support. And we have to have a referendum. We can't just politically decide, neither in the government nor in the parliament, to decide to get rid of the opt-outs. We have to have a referendum. And so far, there are not public support to get rid of either not the euro nor the judiciary affairs. And I think it's not really fair to call for a referendum if there is no sight of actually winning the referendum. And so far, there is no sight of it. However, I do see that things are moving. And I think we can also, as politicians, change the narrative. And this is something I'm arguing for as well. The same with enlargement. Look at how Denmark's approach was to enlargement only a few years ago. We were more skeptical towards enlargement. If you ask the Danish population today, they would say, go ahead, Europe has to be stronger. Enlargement, now. And I think that's also because we took a political leadership and were speaking out about this. And I think you will see that more and more, but I don't think you will see a referendum tomorrow.
But just a short follow-up to this on enlargement, since we will have a panel on enlargement, and I know that we have several representatives here that are from countries that are still not members of the EU. And you said it's not easy, but you will try and find solutions. Can you say a little bit about the solutions, where you see solutions? Perhaps I know you have a minute, but it's okay.
Underlining, it's not easy. Well, we really want to move on with enlargement, and I cannot underline this enough. This is very important for Danish EU presidency because it goes with enlargement and it goes with the European role or influence internationally, our global influence. We have to move on with enlargement. This is a matter of making Europe stronger. We are very sad to see that when it comes to Ukraine, we have one country blocking. Hungary is blocking for enlargement with Ukraine, but we are 26 member countries that actually want to move forward. That is an obstacle because it requires unanimity to move forward. Unfortunately, that is a practice that has developed. We will try to find solutions on that. I know Hungary is saying that there are issues with the minority in Ukraine. Let's see if we can help to sort that out. I know there's already a good dialogue between Ukraine and Hungary about this, and we really hope that this will be solved because we are 26 other member states who wants to move on with Ukraine. And by the way, we also want to move on with Moldova. We also want to move on with a lot of the countries on West Balkan that are doing pretty well. I just came home from Albania and Montenegro this week. I was in Montenegro Monday and Albania Tuesday. They are doing a really good job. They are moving ahead, and they also see that there is a momentum right now. There has been enlargement fatigue for many years, and we also been a part of it. But now there is open window, and they are delivering. So I hope we will be able to open more clusters, close some clusters and chapters during our presidency.
Excellent. Thank you so much for starting our conference with this great presentation. Please give Minister Marie Bjerre a hand. Thank you so much. Yes, thank you. Please, and while the minister is leaving the room, we will get ready for our next presentation, which is with the Director General of the Government Office for the Coordination of European and Euro-Atlantic Integration of Ukraine, Oleksandr Ilkov. I'm kind of looking a little bit. Will we have somebody on the screen? We will move directly to Ukraine. Oh yeah. So yeah.
Yeah. Good afternoon. Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Are you able to see us, or I'm not quite sure? Yes, you can see us, and you can see me. Yeah, welcome, Mr. Ilkov. Welcome. Thank you so much for taking time to do this presentation for us. You are with us at the Danish Institute for International Studies in Copenhagen, and the audience is kind of a mixture of members of the Trans-European Policy Studies Association, TEPSA, representatives from embassies, different embassies here in Copenhagen, civil servants, and also experts on European affairs. Welcome, and please, the floor is yours. Yeah, go ahead.
Dear friends, colleagues, fellow Europeans, as organizers already announced, it was originally expected that the keynote address would be delivered by Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister for European and Euro-Atlantic integration, and our chief negotiator, Olga Stefanishina. However, at this very moment, she's in Brussels holding a series of high-level meetings as part of the ongoing EU accession talks. But given the importance of both her mission there and our shared dialogue here, she has entrusted me with the honor of delivering the key messages on her behalf. And for me, it's not only a duty, but really a profound privilege. Gatherings like this under the TEPSA network reflect what Europe is truly about. It's not just treaties and institutions, but it's solidarity, vision, and shared responsibility. And in times of great challenge, they remind us that the unity is not a slogan, it's a strategy. And today, more than ever, that strategy must be activated. Today, this responsibility feels heavier than ever. And from where I stand in Kiev, the urgency is not just a matter of rhetoric, it's our daily reality. And perhaps that view is worth sharing. Yes, urgency has become a word we repeat often, almost to the point of losing its meaning. But the facts are stark. For over 3 years now, we have been warning that European security is not simply under pressure, it's being dismantled. Let's be clear, the current collapse of the European security order did not begin in 2022. For us, it started in 2014 when Russia first invaded Ukraine, and that was the first stage of disintegration. The second came when the web of Cold War era treaties on conventional and missile forces, the very architecture that keep peace through deterrence, began to unravel. These treaties allowed the Cold War to stay cold. Their demise marked a dangerous drift into the unknown. To call today's tensions a new Cold War is misleading. It's not a new standoff, it's a new instability, unfortunately. The third stage is upon us right now, the largest war on European soil since 1945, and just when many thought we had hit rock bottom, someone knocked from below. That someone is the shifting geopolitical tide in the Euro-Atlantic space and the first stage of this collapse, and likely not the last. What matters most now is not just how we describe this crisis, but how we respond to it. And there are two hard truths emerge. The first one is that our collective response has too often been too slow and too cautious. And the second, that at every stage Europe sought dialogue with the aggressor, and at every stage it was ignored. Yet there is a silver lining. Europe has made serious efforts to enhance its security over the past decade, but the pace must now match the stakes, and that requires vision. Waiting for the war to end is not a strategy. Believing that peace will bring a return to normal is an illusion. There is no normal to return to. We must build a new security order together, not after the war, but during it. And one country in the EU has shown the way, and it's Denmark. Denmark's model began by remaining how aid can be delivered, not through bureaucracy, but through results. And today, 40% of the weapons used by Ukraine's defenders are made in Ukraine. Our defense industry has grown from 1 billion to 35 billion in just 3 years. This is step one, creating a new model of defense cooperation driven by mutual investment and trust. Step two can follow during Denmark's EU Presidency, scaling this model into the European framework for defense integration. A common defense industrial base built on solidarity, speed, and strategic vision. Step three is also clear, using this momentum to accelerate Ukraine's EU accession. This is not charity, it's our shared interests, shared values, shared defense, and Denmark knows this. Minister Marie Bjerre has personally confirmed that all accession clusters can be opened this year, and this is both a vote of confidence in Ukraine's reform path and recognition of our role in defending Europe itself. Step four is perhaps the most essential, collective deterrence, not just military, but political, economic, strategic. Ukraine has been building it since 2014, and now Europe must do the same. Without deterrence, there can be no credible negotiations with Moscow and no lasting peace. Deterrence is the price of stability, and its success will depend on coordination across all areas, from sanctions to supply chains, from resilience to enlargement. Just yesterday, the EU adopted its 17th sanction package against Russia, and work on the 18th, as we know, began immediately. This is the tempo we need, but we can go further by lowering the oil price cap to $30 and cutting all the financial fuel of Russia's war machine. Lastly, there is one crowning element of deterrence, and this is enlargement. As Minister Bjerre aptly put it, enlargement today is not a matter of procedure, it's a geopolitical imperative. Ukraine's EU membership is not merely about ticking off clusters of the acquis. It is about ensuring stability where instability once reigned. It's about reinforcing the European project where it is most tested. Ukraine is ready to move forward and ready to move fast. We have fulfilled all the necessary preconditions for opening the first negotiation cluster, fundamentals. We are now finalizing our negotiation positions for the clusters 2 and 6, and we are committed to continuing reforms with the same determination even amidst war. We therefore call on all EU member states to support this next step. It's not only about Ukraine's future, it is about Europe's credibility, its resilience, and its ability to act. This is the benchmark we must not forget and the standard we must act upon. Let us stay bold, let us stay united, and let us build European security not someday, but now, together. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ilkov. Can you hear me? Am I on here?
Yes, I hear you.
Yes. I am actually not quite sure whether you are able to take one question, or how is it? If there is one, is it technically possible? Yes, we can have one question. Is if there's a question. It was a very clear message from the director. No. I'm waiting here. No. Yeah, but you delivered your message, Mr. Ilkov, and I thank you again. I'm sure this is a crucial and a very difficult situation, so I appreciate very much that you took time to be with us, and we will continue with this question regarding enlargement, but also security and some of the issues that you were raising in your address here. Your speech here your address here will be followed by a panel on security chaired by Kristi Nissen, and for sure this will be continued, what you just raised. So thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Thank you, and please.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Okay, so we will follow with the first panel of the conference, which will be chaired by Kristi Nissen, who's from the think tank Europe, a Danish think tank Europe, used to be a very dear colleague and a colleague here at DIIS, specialized in EU defense and security policy. Christine was actually the main researcher when we did a big study on what it meant to Denmark, and this is coming back to the question regarding the opt-outs and the one on defense. We were being asked by the government, by the ministry in 2019, and we did it in 2020. A big study on what it meant to Denmark to have an opt-out on defense, and Christine was charging this study. So she's really an expert on the question you raised, and also some of the issues that the Minister Bjerre addressed. Christine, are you ready?
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Introduce your speakers.
Yes. You are standing up for AI well, and Svitlana, where are you? Just saw you before. There you are. Perfect. A mic for Svitlana. Okay, and we have that too. Okay, thank you so much, Cecilie, for that introduction, and thank you to everyone here for drawing up this excellent event. And we start 2 minutes ahead of time, this panel. I think that's impressive. Welcome to our panelists, and indeed welcome to this first panel named Europe Rearmed, Ukraine and the Future of Security. That's Rearming Europe. That's the title of our panel, but it's also the title of the European Commission's latest and most ambitious to date defense strategy, launched just some months ago in March. And today, as we have already discussed at this point, Brussels and indeed the whole of Europe is talking about rearmament, not as a taboo, but as a necessity, as we heard the minister stress very clearly. And rearming Europe is rethinking everything that we thought we knew about peace and power and protection in our modern time. And in that rethinking and restructuring of our security, Ukraine plays obviously a very central role, because their security and Europe's are closely linked. We cannot have one without the other. And to unpack some of these very big and very timely and very difficult questions, I'm lucky to be joined by two distinguished and very insightful voices. We have Ian Bond, Deputy Director at the Center for European Reform. You have extensive knowledge about many of these things that we'll be discussing for the next 1 hour and 15 minutes or so. Russia, European Union foreign policy, US foreign policy. Then we have Svitlana Chekunova. You're a leading expert on energy at the Razumkov Center in Kiev, and your research or focus connects two very vital front lines: energy security and national defense. And we'll hear you talk more about why protecting Ukraine's critical infrastructure now and in some post-war future must be part of any credible security strategy, also very much for Europe and Ukraine, of course. Kristi Nissen, I got a very nice introduction by Cecilie, so I'll not go much more into that. I will be moderating, which I look very much forward to, also because I have a long list of questions for you. We'll also open up the floor for our audience. I will, however, also, because I was lucky enough to be one of the authors behind the excellent TEPSA recommendations, I'll also do a very short sort of scene setter, a very brief presentation on how indeed the EU is indeed trying to rearming itself politically, institutionally, and also what role Denmark can have when it holds the EU presidency in just a few months. So I'll do that, a very quick scene setter. Then we'll hear from our two speakers, followed by a discussion on stage, and we'll open up the floor for you as well. And if we start out, there's been quite a few turning points the last couple of years. That has very much shaken the foundation of Europe's security architecture. There are many, but at least two very sort of general constants that can no longer be taken for granted. One of them is peace on the European continent, the absence of territorial war in Europe, we once saw that as a constant, as permanent, this absence of territorial war. That constant is now gone with Putin's full-scale invasion of Ukraine a little over 3 years ago, and of course the turning point, as just mentioned by our Ukrainian speaker, was already beginning in 2014. Then our sort of world as we know it started to look different. Conventional war is back on our continent. And then the other constant that has been the foundation of the European security architecture for all of our modern time is the American security guarantee. Once a very bedrock of European defense, now deeply uncertain. That underlined my point. The return of Trump has also sort of very much sharpened, a trend that we have also seen for some years, right? America is stepping back. So, in other words, Europe's security order is not just under pressure, it's being rewritten these years. After the end of the Cold War, Europe took a bet that now seems to have failed. And that's a problem for obvious reasons, but also it's a problem for how we think about the solutions to address the situation we are now in. Because if we take a very sort of big picture historical view, we made this grand strategic bet when the Cold War ended, back to these constants that I mentioned before that are no longer constants. And this bet was that in this peaceful world, in this globalized world, we placed our security and our prosperity as well in a new kind of logic, or maybe not a new, because it has been the very part of the very DNA of the EU since the European Union was born. And that logic was interdependence, right? The assumption was very sort of simple, and it seemed very clever as well. Dependence on others brings peace and prosperity and stability. Security is guaranteed because not just because we have the American security guarantee, because we have NATO, but also by the very fact that you don't go to war with your friends or those countries that you depend on. And then we have a process of globalization that brought cheap Chinese goods to Europe and cheap gas from Russia, and we had this cheap, you could say, security also coming from the US. The perfect triangle that worked for a while. Now we see that it has failed. Russia has turned energy into a weapon. China has become a strategic competitor, and the American umbrella is no longer a guarantee, to say the least. So what was once our strength, this deep web of interdependencies on others, friends and foes, is now very much a vulnerability. So what's the plan from Europe's side to face this problem? What do we do now? And as Einstein has famously said, you cannot solve a problem with the same thinking that created it. And that's precisely the challenge that we're facing right now, because these crises that are confronting Europe today, from energy to security to technology, are not just technical, they're also very much existential. And existential crisis demands existential change. And we are seeing that Europe is trying to sort of move into a new look on the world where you moving away from dependence towards independence. and where you are moving away from free trade into a new kind of strategic protectionism, even sort of a Europe first mindset that is becoming popular in Brussels right now. And we're also moving away from soft power to investing in hard power. But this is not just a change in policy that you do from one day to the next. It's also very much a change in worldview, and it's a big. It requires some big shifts, and it's very much will be messy and contested, and definitely easier said than done. I think that a very good sort of example where this kind of move towards independence is the area of security and defense, which we're talking about in this panel today. Here we have sort of this term of strategic autonomy that has gone from abstract and also very much contested to now becoming policy. So to some extent, you could say that defense is very much a test case, and it's a hard test case. Because Europe's challenge here is double. We've talked about it already. The minister hinted on it. It's also very much existential, as we have already discussed, but it's also industrial, right? Because during years of peacetime, we very much scaled down on our investment spending on defense dramatically. And when we did invest, we did it outside Europe in US systems or global supply chains. And the result is that we now have this mismatch between what European countries need and what the European defense industry is able to produce. And to that end, the EU is actually trying to change this around and have introduced a series of new instruments with this dual focus that it's both sort of building European security in the long term, but also very much have a focus, a short-term focus, so to speak, on Ukraine and helping out Ukraine, because that was very much also showcasing this trend that was already very much existent, that we did not have the capabilities and we did not have the means to produce them. But sending off a lot of those capabilities that we had to Ukraine exposed it even further. So there has come out a lot of new strategies and instruments in the last couple of years from the European Commission and the EU system as such. We have a European Defence Industrial Strategy followed by a program that is likely to be negotiated during the Danish presidency, where the idea is very much also to co-fund common defense projects in Europe. And then we've also seen some smaller EU regulations already, which has already been implemented, ASAP and EUROPA, to scale up production and also intensivize joint procurement across member states. So those are already there. And then most recently we have had the white paper, this idea of rearming Europe that the minister also talked about before 2030, and even a loan, the safe loan has been introduced as a further way to intensivize joint procurement for member states. So we have the toolkit there, still very much under construction, but far more ambitious than what we have seen before. And then I'll end soon, but say two small things about Denmark, because even though we haven't had the Danish sort of official presidency priorities being announced yet, there's no doubt that those issues that we're discussing today, we could also hear the speech prepared by the minister. European defense and security, and also Ukraine, is very much going to be on the top of that list of the Danish presidency's priorities. And I think that there are several of things that stand out in terms of how Denmark may move forward this agenda, as Richard Young's also very precisely formulated. We do have Ukraine in a limbo right now, and that limbo needs to stop soon. So there is no doubt that Denmark will take the helm at a pivotal moment. And when it comes to security and defense, there are several things that could be done. One, secure this rollout of the new EU instruments, not least this Rearmed Europe plan, as the title of this panel goes. Finalize some of these concrete instruments and get those off the ground that are very likely to follow under the Danish presidency. And then we have also heard already at this point this Danish model that could be scaled up even further by integrating Ukraine's defense industry into EU supply chains, which is very much on the table. So Denmark could definitely push and will push more here. And then there is this new idea of having a European preference where we need to strengthen and build our own independent European defense industry, but we have to do it while striking this odd balance where we do not undermine the transatlantic link more than necessary. And indeed, we can also use Denmark's fiscal weight to help broker some sustainable funding for some of these long-term priorities. So it's about getting things done, and there's a lot to be done, for sure. So that was it for me for now. I will pass the floor to our very distinguished speakers. Ian, Bond, I will begin with you. The floor is yours.
Great. Thank you very much indeed, Christine. First of all, let me say it's a great pleasure to be in Copenhagen. I haven't been here, I realise, for about 20 years, which is far too long. I told Christine that I would talk about what Europe could do to save Ukraine from Putin and Trump. But actually, I've been reflecting over the last few days that really where I want to start is with a reminder of what Ukraine is doing to save the rest of Europe from Putin. Yeah. Because I think we sometimes are rather complacent about that. The fact is that for the last 3.5 years, Ukraine has been buying the rest of Europe time, and it's been paying for that in Ukrainian blood. I'm not sure that we have used that time wisely, and I might say a bit more about the white paper and the programme that the EU can't even agree on what to call it.
No.
You, as a good Northern European, are calling it Rearmed Europe.
Right.
There are parts of Europe where anything that has the word arm in it sounds much too belligerent. And so it has to be known as Readiness 2030. So I don't think we've necessarily done a good job of using the time that Ukraine has bought for us. And I don't know how much longer Ukraine can keep buying time for us. As long as Ukrainians keep fighting, let's be very clear, that is keeping Russia away from the rest of us. But we have to ask ourselves, can that go on forever? And I'm not sure that it can. I think that complacency in Europe is something that long predates the war in Ukraine. for most of us, and I would include the UK in this, even though we probably weren't the worst offenders, we assumed for a very long time that the Americans would always be there. That we could, to some extent, underspend on our own defence because the Americans, with their immense defence budget, their immense military power, would always be there. Donald Trump has more rudely challenged those assumptions than any of his predecessors, but you can go right back to the Obama administration and the pivot to Asia to see that the writing was on the wall. It just wasn't painted in 6-foot-high letters, accompanied with bad language and violence. Every time Trump talks to Putin, it becomes clearer that the security situation in Europe is very, very different and that we cannot rely on the US. We've got about a month to go to the NATO summit in The Hague, and I suspect that the overwhelming feeling in most prime ministers' offices around Europe is, oh God, what is he going to say this time? Since we're here in Copenhagen, I wonder what he'll say about Greenland. If not in the formal sessions, then in his press conferences. What will he say about the future of US forces in Europe? I can see that Kristi Raik is here in the audience. I know that the US ambassador to NATO was at the Lennart Meri conference last weekend, and that he said that the US intended to withdraw troops from Europe, that it would be an orderly process, but according to the quote that I saw, we are not going to have any more patience for foot dragging in this situation. So what kind of American presence are we going to have in Europe after this? Who's going to benefit from the reduction in the US presence in Europe? I mean, I think I know the answer to that. It's only Vladimir Putin. So as the US reduces its commitment to Europe, Ukraine's success and Russia's defeat becomes even more critical to the future of European security. Ukraine itself is being threatened by both Putin and Trump. I mean, Putin wants to eliminate a sovereign Ukraine from the map. And every time someone suggests that, this is all about NATO or, Putin's got legitimate grievances, he will remind us that his objectives have not changed, that he fundamentally does not believe that Ukraine exists legitimately as an independent state. He's taking a statement attributed to Stalin that death solves all problems, no person, no problem, and he's applying it to a whole country. No country, no problem. Trump is threatening Ukraine because, as we saw with the minerals deal, he basically sees this as an opportunity for extortion, not as a strategic partner. I'm afraid not entirely certain that all European prime ministers still, after 3.5 years of war, or if you like to look at it from another point of view, 11 years of war, I'm not sure that they all still understand what is at stake. I'm not sure that they all grasp that Putin's objectives territorially may be limited to Ukraine, although I don't think they are. I think they go beyond that. But that in terms of European security, his aims were set out in the two documents that the Russian side gave to the Americans late in 2021, calling for the rollback of NATO to its pre-1997 borders. In other words, before the first post-Cold War enlargement of NATO, and the removal of NATO forces from Central and Northern Europe. The logic of Putin's approach is that one way or another you have to control the destiny of neighbouring countries. So my favourite George Kennan quote, which goes back to, I suppose, the late 40s or early 1950s, was the jealous eye of the Kremlin, when it looks beyond its walls, can only see vassals or enemies, and countries that do not want to be one must reconcile themselves to being the other. That is as true under Vladimir Putin as it was under Joseph Stalin. So it's vital that Ukraine saves, that Europe saves Ukraine, Ukraine having saved Europe for the last 3.5 years. What does that mean in concrete terms? First, it definitely means an increase in defence production and defence efforts. And it's not just about producing more weapons, it's about being able to use them in a context where you may not be able to rely on the US to provide a command structure, to provide the enablers that we have come to rely on for the last 80 years. We've already heard the Danish model mentioned a couple of times. I mean, I think this is something that Europeans have to think about much, much more seriously. We have discovered that Ukraine innovates extremely effectively, that it has an excellent feedback loop that takes the lessons learned on the battlefield and takes them back into industry very quickly, and that it can produce things more quickly and more cheaply than anybody else in Europe. It is beyond all logic that we are not taking up the spare capacity that still exists in the Ukrainian defence industrial sector to increase production both for Ukraine and for the rest of us. European defence manufacturers themselves need to learn the lessons of the way that war is being waged in Ukraine. I'm not sure we're there yet. And that's partly the fault of governments and it's partly the fault of industry. But if I look at the UK, we're still thinking in terms of being able to procure small numbers of exquisite pieces of equipment rather than very large quantities of equipment that is going to be expended very quickly in a battle. I think we need to work on that. The second thing that I think we need to do to help save Ukraine is to be willing to deploy European forces in circumstances in which they may directly confront Russia. I don't think that leads inevitably to World War III. What we have seen over the years is that actually Putin is quite he is a risk taker in some ways, but he's a cautious risk taker. He's not a mad gambler. He is the poker player who calculates what are the risks of putting all of his chips forward and how much can he afford to lose. We saw that in Syria. We saw it to some extent in 2015 when Turkey shot down a Russian fighter. That Putin's reaction was actually very, very modest. And I think one area where Europeans can really help is with air defense, which is an area where Ukraine is increasingly stressed. There are a lot of air defense aircraft in various parts of Europe that could actually be used, that could be based in NATO territory, but could be used to help keep at least the western part of Ukraine as a much, much harder target for Russian missiles. The third thing I think we need to do is to help Ukraine stand on its feet and prepare to be a stable and prosperous country once the fighting stops. That means providing a credible security guarantee so that Putin is not tempted to keep testing things out or simply destabilizing the country by, occasionally lobbing a missile over the border. Ukraine's going to need a lot of investment, foreign investment in particular. And foreign investors will not come to a place where they think their factories are going to have a cruise missile coming through the skylight any time. We also have a great opportunity to help Ukraine to invest. We in Europe are sitting on the vast majority of the 300 billion euros of Central Bank of Russia assets that were immobilized at the start of the war. We are still arguing about whether we should hand those assets over to Ukraine, whether, if we do that, it will destabilize the euro as a reserve currency. No, it won't. The point about reserve currencies is there aren't very many of them. There aren't very many choices for countries that have to hold their reserves somewhere. And, given the choice between keeping your money in euros, provided that you're not actually intending to invade your neighbors, keeping your money in euros versus keeping them in, Nigerian kwacha, I think it's pretty clear that the euro is going to remain a reserve currency regardless of what we do to Russian central bank assets. And I think the final point I'll say is it means accelerating the process of integration of Ukraine into the EU. Now, the membership process moves forward at its own pace. I understand that. And I understand that it requires unanimity for everything. And at the moment, every step forward is being vetoed by Hungary. But I think we have to start thinking about more inventive ways in which you can integrate step by step. So if I think about the Franco-German expert joint report that was published a few years ago about the kind of concentric circle model for a future Europe, I think we have to look again at, is it possible to find ways that a country like Ukraine can be given some of the privileges of membership without being a member? I know that when it comes to the UK, the EU likes to say cherry picking is impossible. The single market is one thing. We all know that isn't true. The EU picks cherries all the time. So fine, don't allow the UK to pick cherries. But the fate of Ukraine is much too important. If there are cherries there, let the Ukrainians have them. I'll stop it there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ian. I'm glad that you did give a prescription of how Europe can indeed also help saving Ukraine. And I took many notes. I wrote down at least 3 points. More capabilities, and those to be autonomous ones. Fill up the capacity of the Ukrainian defense industry, and really be inspired of what Ukraine is doing, not least when it comes to building and innovating its defense industries. And then also be brave, including being ready to deploy European troops to Ukraine. I have many questions for you. I'll hold them back a little bit. Now I am very happy to give the word to you, Svitlana, to tell us more about energy and how energy security relates to national defense, because this was also the war that taught us how energy is so crucial and so very much interlinked with quite a lot of policy areas, very much also that of security. Svitlana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you for invitation. Thank you for introduction. And I'm happy to contribute to the discussion we have today. A very important discussion. So my mic is working. It's not on. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah.
So, Indeed, energy systems are an asset to the national security, and the defense and energy sectors are interconnected, and it is of priority to make energy sector more protected and more resilient. And that's what we've learned during the wartime. Apart from the actually physical protection that we can give to energy assets, building the shelters, providing a high level of security by anti-aircraft defense, there are many more aspects to be considered to guarantee holistic approach to sustainability of the energy system. And I would like to focus on the main three trends at the cross-cutting between the two sectors, national defense and energy sector, especially in the context of Ukraine's reconstruction and rebuilding amid ongoing war. And I would like to focus on the 3 points. The first one is reinforcing and decentralizing energy infrastructure. The second one is interconnectivity with the European energy systems. And the last point is the Danish-Ukrainian partnership. So the first one, there is a strong focus on reinforcing and decentralizing energy infrastructure to withstand military attacks and ensure operational continuity. The kinetic attacks have been there since 2022, and they have continued throughout 2023, 4, and 5, disrupting the energy supply systems, also water supply systems, sometimes even resulting in the blackouts or power outages across the country. So Ukraine needs to expand its distributed power generation. We also call it a decentralization in order to make less vulnerable. And this approach allows to electricity production and transmission that relies on numerous small local energy facilities across the country. This could be cogeneration facilities, gas-fired power generators, renewable energy facilities. And that's, I have to emphasize the importance of the renewable energy sources, because renewables not only enhance the energy autonomy, but also reduce the reliance on the imported fossil fuels, many of which are linked to geopolitical risks. Ukraine has been investing a lot in the solar, wind, bioenergy projects and that are community-based and less vulnerable to centralized failure. This is something that Ukraine will rely on when there will be there will be more reconstruction, because the reconstruction is already underway. But this is important for the future challenges. And Ukraine has been committed to the green agenda and has been trying to do a lot in order to introduce more renewable energy sources and make economy more green and resilient. The alignment of Ukraine's energy policy with the Renewable Energy Directive marks a significant milestone in its legislative harmonization with the European Union acquis. This includes the gradual replacement of the feed-in tariff with market-based instruments such as net billing, guarantees of origin, the integration, the concept of the active consumer into the national energy legislation reflects a shift to more participatory and decentralized energy market model. We have also a greatly harmonized legislative framework on the energy efficiency. And there's a law being enacted recently on the energy efficiency, and it means that we have a good basis for economic, institutional, and legal basis for the energy performance in the production, transportation, distribution, and supply. And introduction of the principle of energy efficiency first in public decision making makes it a good point in developing in the energy infrastructure projects of the future. It is also important to emphasize the cybersecurity as a crucial element of protection, and also a component in countering the Russia's aggression. And investments are essential here to enhance Ukraine's capacity to respond and recover from Russian cyber attacks, particularly those targeting the infrastructure operators. We all remember the sandworm attack that happened in 2022, and inflicting a loss to power system, to defense system, and also to the telecommunications. The second trend or aspect I have mentioned is integrating energy systems with those of European Union. Despite the war, the energy system in Ukraine continues to work with the European Continent Grid (ENTSO-E). This is European Network of Transmission System Operators for Electricity. And it was that night when the war broke out, or when the electricity grids of Ukraine and also Moldova were successfully synchronized with the European power system operated by ENTSO-E. This serves both short-term and long-term benefits to both sides, because in the short term, this integration has enabled Ukraine to stabilize the electricity supply during the periods of intensive Russian attacks, and also planned maintenance of the nuclear power plants. As you know, Ukraine relies on nuclear energy most of all. It has also facilitated a substantial electricity supports from Ukraine to the neighborhood countries, generating in critical revenues to Ukrainian economy. And I would like to also emphasize the Danish-Ukrainian partnership. I had an honor to be, especially Mykolaiv Danish partnership. I was honored to be a part of the team providing technical advice to the Danish Ministry of Foreign Affairs on making the strategic master plan for Mykolaiv. This is a city in the southern Ukraine. This is a master plan. This master plan has horizon of up until 2050, and we were inspired by the Danish companies and also by urban technologies, including also renewable technologies, in order to provide a visualization of a modern and the green city of the future with the principle of building back better. And this was also performed as a response to the President of Ukraine's call to Denmark to supervise the reconstruction of this Ukrainian city. But Denmark is also providing a lot of electricity devices, like electricity generators and heating devices, to people living in Mykolaiv city and the region. It has also funded 13 mobile heating boilers to the city of Mykolaiv, and also funded repairs of Mykolaiv's existing central heating systems. Just to wrap up with this Danish-Ukrainian partnership, I would like to emphasize that, yes, energy security means national security, and there is a room for work, and there's a lot of things to do to make energy system more resilient and more protected, especially when we are talking already about reconstruction of Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Svitlana. And that's the thing which makes our security situation so complex right now. Because yes, Putin has brought back conventional war to Europe, something that we thought belonged to the history book. That is now back. But the war, our security situation, is also very much characterized by all these unconventional threats that you mentioned, energy, infrastructure attacks, cyber attacks, hybrid attacks. So these are the unconventional threats are as present as ever, as your remarks reminded me. Thank you so much, Svitlana, and thank you both. In a minute, we'll open up for questions from the audience. I know we have a lot of expertise in the room, but before we do that, I'll as I promised, abuse my moderator privileges just a bit and ask you some questions of my own. And the best questions are probably the ones that you can answer yourself, right? And a very sort of basic one, and one which I sadly find very hard to answer these days and weeks and months, is what a realistic best case scenario would be for ending the war in Ukraine. What would that look like in short terms and also perhaps in the medium term? And also, what concrete role should Europe and the EU be playing in such a best case scenario? What concrete role can Europe and the EU be playing in fostering such a best case scenario? I'd actually like both of you to give your comments on that question, if you'd like. Ian?
So I'm going to do something which is probably unforgivable, which is to challenge the premise of the question.
Yes, you are absolutely allowed to do that.
Which is that the war is likely to end at some foreseeable point. I mean, this war started because Putin chose to start it. It will end because Putin chooses to end it. Peace talks are, I'm afraid, a distraction, and to the extent that they distract us from doing things to strengthen Ukraine, they're a dangerous distraction. My realistic, I think, I'm not going to call it a best case, my realistic case is that we succeed in reinforcing Ukraine to the point where it is impossible for Russia to make further advances on the battlefield at an acceptable cost, and that we back that up with measures that will damage Russia economically to the point where it becomes much less attractive to carry on with the war. And we are a long way away from that.
Yeah.
You know, the amount of LNG that European countries are importing from Russia is going up, not down. That's unforgivable. I don't care how much cheaper Russian LNG is than anybody else's. It is unforgivable to be putting money into the pockets of a country that is attacking one of your partners. So that, you know, basically, I'm afraid, this is not the year that the war is going to end. But it might be the year when we start to make it much less attractive for Putin to continue it.
Right. I think that Ursula von der Leyen is calling this the steel porcupine strategy, which
why not?
She has mentioned a couple of times to do exactly what you just said, and hopefully Europe will live up to its role of doing just that. Svitlana, what do you have any comments in terms of best case scenario?
Yes, I agree to what Ian has just said, and I think if we have sooner or later we have at least ceasefire, we can continue peaceful negotiations endlessly, because it is impossible to continue peaceful negotiations while there is a battlefield action and also there is a civilian casualties that we are experiencing almost every day, with the Russians' missiles and drones are flying over the heads of Ukrainians. At the same time, I think our international partners should be more decisive in putting more sanctions against Russia. Because, again, while discussing the peace and also while having the ceasefire, it would be important to have more sanctions that are really active, and they could actually help Ukraine and also Europe. And these sanctions have to be, I think, stricter even than they used to be. And it's not just about this shade fleet, or it's not just about the gas supplies. And we know, yes, Europe continues to import some of the resources from Russia. So the more sanctions, the better is to make Russia weaker and less capable of spending more money for the military complex. Also, I think all those initiatives, for example, Repower EU, when Europe was supposed to refuse Russian gas, all of the Russian gas, this is also something to focus on and continue. Because, for example, Ukraine has now, as you know, stopped the gas supplies through gas transportation system of Ukraine. And that was very hard also step, because it was bringing revenues to Ukrainian economy. But that was really a step, because it is impossible to fight the enemy at the same time transport Russian gas, bringing revenues to the Russian economy. So if this initiative like Repower EU continues, that would also benefit a lot to the end of the war.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And hopefully also now we just got our Danish Commissioner for Energy, Dan Jørgensen, who presented his long-awaited roadmap towards ending all Russian gas just recently. And what I found to be particularly interesting there was exactly to actually take, I don't know how they're going to do it, but take a step away from these non-permanent measures that a sanction is, and making it into permanent legislation. So, and he promised it will come soon. So let's see whether this will change something. Just one follow-up question, and also relating back to sort of the role that Europe and the role that the EU and the EU member states should be playing. I really liked your comment before, Ian, that your sort of end comment that Ukraine should have the cherries, right? I think that was excellently put, and I think that the EU is at least trying to sort of follow along that path when they, in this these measures, the white paper that cannot figure out what to call and whatever, they do sort of want to keep and to integrate the Ukrainian defense industry into the European one. And also when it comes to energy reconstruction, there are also quite a lot of things going on there in terms of letting Ukraine get the cherries. But I would like to sort of maybe have you elaborate a little bit more on how that could be done, because we had the Danish minister stating here just not that long ago, and if one is a strong supporter of Ukrainian EU membership, it's her, but she also obviously mentioned the very sort of basic fact that we have now one, maybe in the future more, member states that are just saying no. So how can we sort of get around that and let Ukraine have the cherries?
Well, let me pick one very specific cherry that we are about to take away from Ukraine, and that is the autonomous trade preferences that the EU extended to Ukraine at the beginning of the war. To allow it to export quota-free its agricultural and food products. If nothing is done,
in just over, where are we, about 2 weeks' time, those trade preferences will be allowed to expire. Quotas will be reimposed on the amount that Ukraine is able to export. And moreover, because of the way that the quotas are calculated, they will be set at a level determined in part by when Ukraine was struggling to export because of in the early stages of the war, when it was not able to export as much. The infrastructure was not there for exporting. So that's a cherry that we're about to take away from the Ukrainians, which we should be giving back.
Yeah.
I think there are probably other economic sectors, and Svitlana referred to some of the areas in which Ukraine is has already aligned itself fully with the acquis, where I would like to see the EU making some also, autonomous moves, as it were, to allow Ukraine into those parts of the market. So it's not just about defense,
right,
but it's more generally about how you prop up the Ukrainian economy.
And Svitlana, cherries when it comes to energy and reconstruction, how many are there left?
There's a lot of them. I will just comment on one of them. When I was mentioning the integration of the energy systems with the European Union systems, here we have, of course, here's the room for work, as I said, because we have to ensure the market coupling with EU. We have to implement EU legislation to enable this market coupling. But we also are expecting, for example, from the energy community to allow more capacity for Ukraine, for example, to export energy, electricity in the future. Of course, interconnectors are to be built, and also there is a lot of measures to be undertaken, but there's also things that are, Ukraine would expect to be taken maybe faster, because the more the larger is the amount that Ukraine is capable to import and export, the better opportunities it is for Ukraine also to stabilize electricity supply, for example, and also have the opportunity to move more electricity to Europe, and especially when it will be a green electricity, because Ukraine is has a good chance to provide more green energy in the future. Also, it is this sector is still developing, but when we are talking about hydrogen as the future fuel, we also have a big opportunity for Ukraine, because Ukraine was already appointed as a part of the system that would provide green hydrogen in the future. Again, this technology is still being, developed, and it's not yet in place here in Europe, because we are relying mostly on the private networks, and it's not just a big developed system. But I see here Ukraine as a part of the future hydrogen backbone system, which is now being developed in Europe. And I know that Denmark is actively participating in this initiative. So there are a lot of different kinds of energy perspectives for Ukraine in European, with Europe.
Thank you so much. And now we open the floor for questions. And I already have noted down that Jim, the Secretary General of TEPSA, will have a question.
Thank you very much, and very interesting exposes. I have a remark and a question. The remark, Ian, is on the question of integrating Ukraine particularly into policies. It's being done. They're already in more than half a dozen major policies, including Horizon, for instance. So I think that is agreed very largely. Unfortunately, I agree with you on the cherry, which may be taken away. It's a highly sensitive issue in Poland, in France, and a few other countries. I do not know what the Union is in the end going to do, but this is a really complicated issue. The question is about the mineral steel of the United States with Ukraine. I mean, I have noticed that many people in Europe said, at last there's an agreement. I mean, my feeling was not like that. My feeling was, what are they doing? Now, I understand the argument that it's something to keep the Americans interesting. But I personally do not think, and I want to have your opinion on this, whether we should accept the reasoning behind this on the part of Mr. Trump, because if we do that, it will have far-reaching consequences on other issues. And my second question is maybe a bit more to Svitlana, is the question of compatibility with the EU, because of case, then people start, I'm not arguing legally here, I'm arguing politically, whether it is acceptable that the United States, as a third party, and in a party which no longer provides guarantee in the long term of security, should have a privileged access compared to the European countries, where you will be a member of, on half of the economy of Ukraine. So I have a real problem with that. So could you answer that question?
Okay, perfect. Okay, so now I have Jim's question, and I have noted down that 5 more people has a question. I think that we'll hold on to Jim's question, and then we'll take 2 more, Kristi, Raik, and the gentleman over here, and then so these 2, and then we'll go back to the panel, and then we'll take 3 more.
Thank you very much to the speakers, Kristi Raik, Director of ICDS in Tallinn. And thanks, Jan, for mentioning Lennart Meri Conference, indeed, which we just organized in Tallinn. And we heard there that, indeed, the US intends to reduce its presence in Europe. It's a matter of when and how quickly, and not if. We should not be surprised. I think Europe is still gradually recognizing what this actually requires, that we need to get serious about preparing to defend ourselves. And you were talking about the various EU instruments. We have talking about what Ukraine has to contribute. But I think we have to be honest to ourselves that the EU also kind of struggles to respond quickly enough and deliver quickly enough. Just think of the Draghi report, which points out the various challenges. And my question is, in this situation where the EU struggles to deliver, of course it has an important role to play, but it cannot deliver quickly enough on everything that needs to be done. We see coalitions of the willing emerging, and we see groupings of countries which then are able and willing to move faster. We see some signs of kind of new leadership by the UK, France, Germany, with Poland kind of picking up. So how do you assess this picture? Are you worried about fragmentation? Is it, or is it just a positive thing that we have these active groupings emerging? Thanks.
Yeah, and then last question here. Perfect.
Thank you very much for your presentation. My question would be, in connection with the fact that with the starting a very nice model where you have the Chinese cheap goods, and then you have the Russian energy and the American protection. But now the fact is this: it's not the Chinese goods, but it's the Chinese weapons that are helping the Russian forces. And then on the other hand, you yourself, Ian, you asked this question, which I'm putting it back to you, that the transatlantic relationship, where you have America not wanting to prolong this war because once again their interest is in Asia Pacific region. So you mentioned the thing about pivot to Asia. The third thing which I want to bring, which was not discussed, is the 80% of the population of the world living in the global south do not want this conflict to continue, because it is actually affecting them, their energy needs, their security, food security, etc. So you have a new global situation where the need of Europe is that they should play a role. Finally, how would you see this continuation when America wants to go in a different direction, Asia wants have some expectations from Europe, and continuation of war, maybe only few countries in Europe probably are insisting on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, so we'll start out with those 3 very, very excellent questions, and I'm so glad because I had several of them listed down myself that I wanted to hear your opinion on as well. Firstly, the US-Ukrainian mineral deal, which I also cannot get my head around whether it's the first sort of positive step, because it is something that Zelensky has emphasized again and again, that this is something that he really generally wants. The terms, is as they are, and it seems like exactly as you say, what is behind is Trump wants to get his money back, right? And then there's a question about compatibility, and then Kristi's question, which I think is also so central and something that I'm very happy that we can have some time to discuss, because do we have the right institutional setup in Europe today to address the current situation? NATO and the EU have their problems, right? So are we seeing more fragmentation? Is that fine or not? Will we see the building of new institutional setup in a short, medium-term future? And then this question about the rest of the world, right? The global south, and where are the rest of the world in terms of this conflict? Once again, we have some very Eurocentric eyes on the problem, perhaps. And then I have 3 more on my list. So if you have some sort of quick answers to some very big questions, the floor is yours, both Ian and Svitlana, and then we'll take 3 more questions after that.
Okay. So I'm going to let Svitlana deal with some aspects of the minerals deal.
Right.
But what I will say is I share your worries, but I would be more worried if I thought that this deal was actually going to be implemented by the time that Donald Trump leaves office. I think the reality is that no miners are going to deploy in Ukraine in a time frame where Donald Trump is still going to be in the White House, and this agreement may be forgotten after that. Kristi, I think you're right. I think there is a risk of fragmentation. I mean, if I'm looking specifically at the UK's role in European defence procurement and European defence efforts, then I think that the security and defence partnership that was agreed at the EU-UK summit on Monday is a small step in the right direction, but it's not a complete answer to that problem. Because you're moving towards a situation in which you have an Article 5 guarantee which covers 23 of the 27 members of the EU, but backed by a United States which we can no longer rely on. And you have an Article 42.7 guarantee covering those 23 plus the remaining 4 members of the EU, but not covering a significant number of major European countries, including the UK and Turkey and Norway, and with no command structure or history of exercising to be able to give any reality to the guarantee that is written down on paper, which after all is the firmest guarantee there is. Article 42.7 is a much firmer guarantee on paper than Article 5 of the Washington Treaty. And I think, so a few years ago, I used to laugh at people who said, what we need is the Western European Union again. But the reality is, we may turn out to need something like the Western European Union, which brings together all of the European countries, whether they are part of the EU or not, because otherwise you have a very strange geography and architecture in Europe with these strange gaps where countries are covered by a guarantee that they can't rely on or not covered by a guarantee at all. And it seems to me that that's a destabilizing situation to be in. And I think the last question, I think you do make a very important point, but I would say there's only one country in Europe that is interested in the continuation of this war, and that's Russia. For the rest of us, if the war stopped tomorrow, we would be delighted. And we would be right to be delighted. I think what is important is that we do indeed try to make sure that the supplies on which you rely, whether that's food and agricultural products or whatever, are continuing to flow. And I think that in fact a lot has been achieved in that direction. There's probably more that we could do. But believe me, I don't think there is any country in Europe apart from Russia that thinks what a great idea to carry on with this awful war.
Svitlana?
I will try to surf on what I have heard. I might miss something, but compatibility is the first thing I would like to emphasize. Yes, there is a room for work, and also everyone would be talking about, that sometimes Ukraine is backward and falling behind on what it can do. But we should also think about Ukraine is surviving now, and it is very absolutely impossible. For some of the institutions are still active and still working, but some of them are stepping back. But I think it has to be a good balance between the two parties, because Ukraine is doing a lot in order to fulfill its program, in order to be closer to the accession moment. And there is also, as I said, the balance is also a goodwill and good cooperation between the two parties in order to make it happen as soon as possible. When it comes to the partners and the coalition of the willing, and whether or not we can observe the fragmentation, yes, I would say it's at some point, yes, because there are very controversial arguments that we are listening from the European leaders, and they are changing their mind very quickly. So I think if their standpoint would be solid and very straightforward, and they do not change their mind every single day or every single week, that would give much better ground to believe that the coalition of the willing will actually produce some tangible results. Speaking about the mineral agreement, I haven't seen it yet because it is sort of classified. But from my perspective, any kind of economic cooperation is much better than the battlefield and the armaments and everything. Although, again, Ukraine has to be armed and has to be secure, and the more military assets, the better. But at the same time, we don't know when it is possible to actually perform re-evaluation of what reserves Ukraine has, because all these geological, reconnaissance, it has been done a long time ago. So it's time to revisit these issues and to try to investigate how much really, what kind of earth's rare reserves we have. But as I said, it's much better to start this economic cooperation, even if it is implemented 10 years later. But it's good to start it now and focus better on this kind of peaceful cooperation, economic cooperation, rather than war.
Thank you so much. And now we have a difficult task, because we have 4 minutes left and 3 remarks from the audience. So we'll take the 3 remarks, and then we'll have some super quick answers that will also be sort of a concluding remark from our speakers. Okay, so we have one here.
I'll be very quick. Ian mentioned Greenland, and as we are in Denmark, I want to pose the question to you, Christine. What's the situation and how much economic pressure is there on Denmark, also from the US side? And do you feel enough European solidarity on that front?
Okay, yeah.
The second question on your slide, you had the European Commission in a key role on the defense build-up. And true, a lot going on, but I'm wondering if those mechanisms that have been decided and approved can actually make a real difference for those countries who are not in a situation to invest in defense because of their fiscal situation. Does a EU-wide borrowing program like SAFE or the exceptions from the fiscal rules really help countries that cannot invest in defense? What do you think? And that's another question to you, Christine. I mean, we do have the European Stability Mechanism for the financial crisis. Why not use a European defense mechanism, a sort of intergovernmental setup in that respect? Thank you.
Okay. Yes. And we'll take the rest of the you, and then I think I had one more listed down here. Yeah.
Mariam Khotanashvili, I'm the executive director of Trans-European Policy Studies Association. I couldn't agree more to everything that Ian has said, and I do think that blaming NATO for what's happening in Ukraine is absolutely unacceptable, and I find it very surprising that anyone in Europe would still in one way or another blame NATO for what's happening. Now, talking about NATO and talking about removing the cherries, the recent NATO annual report no longer mentions Ukraine's future in NATO. And I wonder, how would you assess that, Ian? Like, should we be worried? And what are alternative security guarantees that we may foresee for Ukraine? And then we're talking a lot, there's this kind of prevalent narrative now in Europe that we can't defend ourselves. And I wonder, if I fully sign up to that, because isn't it that we are sometimes not really willing enough to defend ourselves? Is this really about our capabilities, or is more about the political will? And I think personally that the cheapest way and the easiest way Europe could defend itself is arming Ukraine, which, is not happening exactly at the pace that would be necessary for Europe to emerge secure from this war. And then going forward, we talk now a lot about rearmament, and rightly so, because it's absolutely necessary. But is that sufficient for providing security to Europe if the kind of political will is lacking to, put some weight behind arms? Thank you.
And then one last very, very quick question.
Hello, Mats Brown, Institute of International Relations, Prague. I think I can be very quick because I want to pose a similar question as Kristi and Paul about the coordination mechanism, right? It's interesting to see the stress of the role of a European Commission while we are talking about European defense, or more correctly, defense industry. And of course, we have a commissioner for defense and space, which is an interesting innovation. But still, just pushing this question a little bit further, because also the main part of the money in Rearm Europe is national money. So what about the role of also the presidency here? Is it something which should be done to kind of facilitate the coordination here? Because there is a big risk that a lot of the spending might be kind of double spending or not spending in the most efficient way to create the coherent defense necessary. And then just one more brief question on the bi-European principle of SAFE and other instruments, and linking to what was said here about turning from interdependence to independence,
right,
which might be kind of dangerous when we take into consideration that the EU's organization is based on the principle of interdependence. But just when we focus on bi-European, when we look at the arms industry, are there any potential risks of that as kind of even speeding up the American withdrawal from Europe, etc.? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I love how we have a very engaged audience, and maybe you also excuse us for taking up 3 minutes of your coffee break, because now we'll have Ian give a super quick 60-second pitch, which also answer all these questions and give a concluding remark from your side. then Svitlana, and then I'll also answer in 60 seconds on Greenland, role of the EU Commission, and so on. Ian?
Right. Paul, yes, there is a problem that all of the instruments that the EU is offering for funding additional defence spending are going to be problematic for countries that are already running large fiscal deficits. And that's why I have considerable sympathy for the argument that you should have something like the Next Generation EU grants scheme that you had for post-pandemic recovery, rather than only loans. So that's one comment. Should we be worried about the absence of NATO of Ukraine from the latest NATO report and from discussions, as I understand it, on the summit declaration? Yes, we absolutely should be worried, but I think it is an inevitable consequence of the position that the US is taking, and you see the same reflected in the G7 negotiations, where apparently the US does not want to refer to Russian aggression, does not want to refer to continued support for Ukraine. And when Rubio was being questioned by the House Foreign Affairs Committee, I think it was a few days ago, he refused to say that Putin was responsible for war crimes. So yes, we should worry about that. Is EU rearmament enough? No, not on its own. And Mats, I think the key question is going to be, Kubilius is very keen that there should be a close connection between NATO's defence planning process and the priorities of EU defence spending. How that is articulated, I think, is at the moment still quite hard to see. Not least because NATO is still having to kind of pass unclassified versions of its plans to the EU because of the Turkey-Cyprus standoff. So until we can resolve some of those interinstitutional problems, I think trying to keep that good connection is going to be quite hard.
Thank you, Ian. And a very brief concluding remark. I know it's hard. Otherwise, we'll continue.
I know there have been a lot of discussions about NATO prospects for Ukraine at the beginning, and then these kind of these kind of discussions were more and more quiet, and then was also an interesting discussion of giving Ukraine a status similar to Israel has, a country which is not a NATO member, but also has a lot of strategic preferences. I don't know, but of course, it's the more opportunities for Ukraine, the better, but let's just leave it to our politicians. And I just would make a very the brief introduction to what Christina would answer, because when we are talking about Greenland, it reminds me of Crimea, So if by no means it happens, that would mean that everyone is allowed to do whatever he wants. Yeah. So. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you for that. Introduction. Exactly as you say, it's the same wording that Putin and China are using. We need it for national security reasons, and now we have to deal with that. It's definitely the biggest foreign policy crisis in our modern time that we, a very, very tiny country, are now facing. And it's dual problematic for Denmark because the US is and has been our most important allies. Many countries feel that, but this is definitely also felt in Denmark. It also underlines how we misread Trump and the Trump administration's goals. When it comes to foreign policy, it wasn't about doing less. Actually, Trump, it seems, have an extremely activist approach where he's literally wanting to make America great again. I think the only positive thing to say about that is how sort of Denmark have managed to engage and be supported by European allies in this question. And I also very much agree with what has been said about the Commission's role in rearmament. If you compare some of the leaks of the white paper with what was actually published, you see that's quite interesting exercise, and you see how the Commission's role is sort of being down framed, and it's very much up to the member states. Many of these measures, it's also very much the member states' own money, right? The loans and the fiscal spending loft. So it's up to the member states. It's a matter of political will, and yeah. Now we have to end. But the good thing is all of these discussions are to be continued in many of the panels later today, tomorrow, where we talk about enlargement, global south, the role of China, the role of the US, maritime security. So thank you so much for such an engaging conversation. Thank you. And now coffee.
The journey continues. Yeah, we have more room now, more space, more seats, more quiet. Welcome back, please. We will have everybody back on their place before we start, if that's okay with you. So we will not... Yes. Yeah. Almost there, almost done. You can come closer now, because we have more... If you feel that coming closer, it would be nice. So we can see and hear you. Yeah. Excellent. 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 Yes. Let me see if this works in a proper way. It does. Yes, welcome back. I hope you had coffee, cake, refreshments, enjoyed small conversation, talks with colleagues, meeting up and so on. So we will continue this afternoon's program with a panel focusing on EU enlargement, and this very, very original title, The Past, Present and Future of EU Enlargement, which is something I came up with because I was a little not that creative during that particular day. So anything, you know, all inclusive. Yeah, but in fact, we actually have a much more focused panel and more focused panelists. And I'm, as you probably already noted, I'm really pleased that we could do this panel, also because this is going to be one of the priorities, as you learned from Minister Bjerre during her speech this morning. That enlargement is one of the priorities of the Danish EU Presidency. Enlarging the EU is a stronger EU. Sounds very... well, sounds wonderful. And then she said, not easy, but try and find solutions. During this panel, of course, I think we somehow will challenge this approach, or perhaps also discuss it, and I very much invite you to be part of the discussion after we have the 3 presentations from the brilliant panelists, because I think this is really a super relevant discussion. taking place at the moment around in European member countries and also outside the EU. So first of all, I want to introduce my panelists, and the first speaker is, I'm going to introduce you one by one, and then you start each of your presentation. And first one is Saskia Hollander, who's a senior research fellow at the Clingendael Institute in The Hague. Saskia will be talking about the necessities to strengthen the EU rule of law toolbox in the context of EU enlargement. She also promised me to talk a little bit about how the debate looks in member countries, what's the situation these days. And then we will have Danijela Jacimovic, professor at the University of Montenegro, and also a TEPSA board member who will be talking about on the subject of shaping tomorrow Montenegro's path. But then you also promised me to focus a little bit during your talk on Western Balkans, and I think that is super important to include, so that we not only focus on Ukraine, which is very important too and relevant, but we also do not forget the Western Balkans and Turkey, and some of the old discussions within this theme. And finally, we will have Kristi Raik, director at the International Center for Defense and Security, also a TEPSA board member. And Kristi would kind of wrap the whole thing up in a way and expand the question and to a broader discussion on what does a geopolitical enlargement mean and what is the interplay between enlargement and European security and defense, especially in the case of Ukraine. So kind of bringing us back also to Ukraine, where we started during this morning. I guess that will be this session. We are supposed to finish 4:15, maybe a little longer, not too much, because then we will all move towards the center of the city and towards the reception at the French Embassy, which is at 5:30, where we'll have a short presentation by the three embassies on the Weimar Triangle. But I'm going to repeat that following this session. So please, our first speaker, Saskia.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this introduction, for the invitation. First a disclaimer. I'm hearing myself very strange. Yeah, am I okay? I hear myself like a robot. I will neglect it. First of all, disclaimer. I think I will not tell you anything that you don't know already. But I wanted to take this opportunity to discuss two lessons from the previous enlargement rounds, and especially for the current member states. Because in the discussions we talk a lot about what has to happen in the candidate countries. Also, my fellow panelists will talk about that. But I wanted to take it back to the current member states because I think we also have a lot of homework to do. The first lesson is that we should not neglect public opinion, which, of course, coming from a Eurosceptic, from an enlargement skeptic country like the Netherlands, I think this is a very important topic, that we take citizens along in that process and that we not start with that when the accession treaties are being negotiated. And the second one, you already mentioned that in your introduction, is that guarantees at the gate in terms of the rule of law, so the Copenhagen criteria, they're not enough. And we see that already in the current member state that they go back on the rule of law. So I think it's very important to fix that first. So concerning the first lesson, public opinion, I think we don't talk about that a lot. What I mentioned, it's not very salient. When I'm speaking for my own country, the Netherlands, nobody talks about enlargement. Ukraine is a bit salient, but the Western Balkans, I think it's really not there in public opinion, in public debate. But when you ask people, they're not very positive. And I think on average in the EU, when you see the last Eurobarometer, I think it's around 50%. So taking all the candidate countries together, with like on the bottom, Austria and France, only 35% supporting EU enlargement. In my own country, it's around 50%.
And as people in this audience know, France will very likely have a referendum in case of enlargement. The Netherlands might also have a referendum. It will not be a binding one, but since we had the Ukraine referendum also, I think it's very difficult to neglect. So I think our politicians, we should really take it into consideration. I think it's also a task for us as think tank community that we really try to raise this awareness in the European publics, in the member state countries, that we really take citizens along. And of course, we discussed it when we were discussing, it's very tricky because politicization can also backlash, it can also turn against you. But I really much want to make the argument that we still have time to do so, and we should not wait until the accession treaties are being negotiated. I think, speaking for my own country, the Clingendael did a public opinion survey on Dutch opinion on enlargement, and concerns are very much rooted in, of course, the costs. I'm sorry, we are Dutch, but also on effectiveness of decision making, migration, and of course the rule of law. So there are pretty much concerns, especially when it comes to the Western Balkans. So I think it's very important to also discuss the trade-offs when it comes to enlargement. And I think what the Dutch really need is this geopolitical narrative. We are far away from where the issues are, but it also affects us. And I think that geopolitical narrative, it's not really resonating yet in the Netherlands, and I think also not really in France and Germany. So what we have to do, the first one is that we really give citizens not only the feeling, but that we actually involve them in co-shaping the enlargement process, so that they are not presented with a fait accompli. And that we really discuss these trade-offs that I just mentioned, one of them being the geopolitics versus the costs. I mean, speaking to Dutch people, there are also costs of not enlarging, and we never really discuss that. And I think that's really a task of us at Clingendael and as a think tank community in large. And because I really believe that enlargement requires democratic mandates, especially when you talk about the rule of law and democracy. We cannot continue this process when we don't have this fix in our own member states. Then the second lesson from the previous enlargement is, of course, the rule of law, and that we cannot take this lightheartedly. And we, of course, only have to look at Hungary, Poland until recently, but also Slovakia. Of course, the current candidate countries are, except for Montenegro, they're not ready to join. Montenegro, Albania make a lot of progress, but they're not joining. And especially because this geopolitical urgency is so high, it is possible that countries will join when they are not really ready. And until recently, the European Union, of course, really had no effective instruments to tackle this. But what I wanted to say is that this is really not just a problem of the East. And I think in the Western European member states, we really like to point our finger not only to the candidate countries, but also to Hungary and Poland. But we also have to look at what's happening in Western European countries with the attacks on academia, on journalists, on think tanks, and of course on the media. So I think we really have to have a debate and a narrative how valuable it is to protect the EU values. One of them being the rule of law. And I really think that we should fix this first before enlargement. Maybe they can go parallel. We can discuss that later. One of the things that have to happen in my view is, of course, Article 7, but it will not change. I think we have to deal with that. If there will be no treaty change, then Article 7 will stay as it is. But luckily, the European Union has more instruments. Had to cut the funds or suspend the funds. We did that for Hungary. We did that for Poland. But there's still quite some hiccups in my point of view. One of them being that they're not used consistently, and that comes back to my previous question. It's really only about attacking Hungary, Poland until recently, but the Commission is not really using these instruments consistently in countries that on the whole and in general do still very well, but have these problems concerning the media and journalists, which also happens in my own country, which always scored very high on the rule of law, but it's now very fast going downhill. hill, not being too pessimistic, but I think it's a concern, and I think the Commission also has instruments to tackle that as well. And second thing that has to, the second recommendation is that the instruments have to be much more clearer. It's now not really clear which instruments are used under which conditions, and under which conditions payments are given back, like what happened to Hungary, but also Poland. So yeah, to sum up, I think enlargement really entails some risks in terms of the rule of law, but I think these risks really can be mitigated once we have this rule of law toolbox fixed. And also we can, as member states, we can do a lot more to support reform process in candidate countries, and not only the institutional reforms, but also supporting civil society and the media and journalists. And yeah, then the third one, what I started with, is really get people involved in the enlargement process, so people in current member states. And I think it's very important that we have brave politicians, which are really much able to provide these political narratives in order to get these democratic mandates. That was it.
Whoa.
Am I so fast? Yeah. I have some points for discussion, but
super. So stay tuned. Keep your questions. Many things super relevant to discuss. Not only focus on Hungary, but also look at the Western European countries, and also this about the trade-offs, the geopolitical. The trade-off of enlargement. Be sure to actually communicate and to have that more highlighted. We will return to that during a Q&A. So now we move to Danijela.
Okay, thank you
Montenegro.
very much. Yes, direct view from the Montenegro. Just a year ago at the PPC in Budapest, I spoke about the strategic moment of enlargement for Montenegro. On that time, it looked that the EU is rebooting its enlargement mechanism, but on that time, part of membership is still seen as a long and challenging process. Today, in Copenhagen, PPC, the enlargement process has been tested once again, and this time in the climate of where geopolitics matter as much as technical reforms. So let's perform wisely now, and let's start with the question: what is the context of enlargement? Yes, I turn it. So, okay, hopefully. So let's talk about the context of enlargement today. Of course, we are facing geopolitical tensions, and they are just like a pot that was bubbling for a long time ago, and now is boiling over. In the heart of this problem, I can see erosion of trust and growing sense of unfairness within international system and between countries. The European Union has played for decades a key role in supporting Western Balkan countries towards democracy and economic prosperity. Yet, despite all this support, genuine democratic and economic transformation remained slow. So I think that we should ask ourselves why. Is it due to domestic challenges, external pressures, lack of sustained political will? Or it is a result of larger system that promises integration but delivers it so slow to inspire real change? I think that these are the questions that we must confront if we are serious about the future of the continent, not only as a peaceful and prosperous, but also fair and inclusive for all. So far, the region has faced this stage, gradual, differentiate integration. And I think that we all can agree that we haven't seen so much success. Let me be honest, as I'm coming from Montenegro, all these terms for me have the same meaning: no integration. I'm really sorry to say that, but it is how it feels. I do understand there are many doubtful voices, not only in Brussels, they're also in EU capitals, but also in our acceding countries, who argue that Union simply won't be able to both to do both widen and to deepen. That system is too stretched, that appetite is too low, and the politics is too complicated. Instead of that, I belong and stand with those who believe that the European Union must be bold, that it must commit to internal reform and enlargement together, no one after another, but as a part of shared and strategic process, successful wave of enlargements with successful waves of reforms should go hand of hand. Are we facing in the region significant consequences of these policies, stage, gradual, differentiate today? My short answer is yes. While Europe's attention highly remains focused on Ukraine, tension in the Western Balkans is rising. Alarm bells are ringing in Belgrade, in Kosovo, and Sarajevo. Geopolitical actors in the region are very, very active in the region. And their interest is not cooperation. Their interest is more making the house with a strategy that is really very clear in their intention to keep region at the edge, to destabilize population, wage cyber and hybrid welfare. Yes, maybe recently you have heard the talk or the word Balkan Spring as a new opportunity for Serbia, for North Macedonia, even Croatia to reconnect with European project. But opportunity without the action is just the words. From my side, the truth is this. 6 Western Balkan countries must be integrated to the European Union as a strategic necessity and security imperative. What can be done, not only with Danish presidency, but even further? Lot, and then sometimes some more. Let's start with the EU growth plan. And just start with our very general sentence that this is the world of high uncertainty and frequent shocks, and there is no room to delay the reforms. European Union step out bold and towards Western Balkan countries with the growth plan for the Western Balkans with very clear purpose to support region in regional integration, to implement reform, build resilience, stimulate sustainable growth, prepare countries for EU membership. Of course, this is the short-term plan from 2024 to 2027, 6 billion of financial assistance, 2 billion of grants, 4 billion of concession loans. But this funding is not funding. This funding brings responsibility because all Western Balkan countries, they needed to actually link all those funds with very intense reforms. So each country of 6 Western Balkan countries, they needed to define tailored reform agenda jointly developed with European Commission. And I would just want to stress the points of the reform agendas: economic competitiveness, rule of law and public administration, green and digital transition, alignment with EU single market. Today, I'm really pleased to say that all Western Balkan countries have adopted their reform agendas by the end of 2024. And I'm pleased also to share with you something that gives me real hope that Montenegro just received first financial tranche from this package last week of 27 million. Of course, half of it is budget support for necessary reforms and half for infrastructure. But what is more important, this first payment confirms that Montenegro is a reliable reform partner and that we are ready to do more. Also, I would like to add that regional economic integration is going further. In October 2025, Montenegro and Albania will become part of fully integrate of single euro payment area. So it will bring a lot of benefits because we can send money to European Union fast and cheap. So probably it will boost business activity. Through this growth plan, free Wi-Fi area is increasing. We reduce roaming cost in the region and significantly reduce with the EU. And addition to that, Public support remains strong, not only for the European Union, but based on the latest Balkan Barometer published by Regional Cooperation Council in the Sarajevo. 82% of Western Balkan citizens support regional cooperation. Let me say something about negotiation process of the region. So from April this year, Albania opened 16 chapters out of 33. Serbia, naughty student, naughty child of EU, opened 22. Not so much progress there, but Montenegro. So we closed 3 chapters in December. We planned much more than it is, but just compare the numbers. So it's 3 chapters, and in previous 12 years we closed 3. So it's 100%. It's in relative terms. So during the last year, of course, we always want more. For now, for this year, actually, we prepare 6 chapters to close. It is already submitted by the March of the current year to the European Commission, and we are waiting a positive reaction first of the European Commission and hopefully with the member states. So we are very optimistic, and we believe that during this year there is going to be 2 intergovernment conferences, one in June and one in December, and that we are hopefully close all the 6. I also want to mention that in December we plan to close 31 chapter, which is foreign policy, but just in the last moment, Croatians open some questions. So, but it's very important to say that it is not about the blockage of the process, that we have to resolve some problems, that we have very good cooperation and bilateral relation with Croatia. Their experts are fully helping our negotiation process and how to fill all these closing provisions, and based on bilateral, so very effective dialogue has been in place, and we are all happy how things are going. So there are some ideas that even in this June we can close 31st, but okay. But what we are doing right now, we are doing for our job and our homework for the next year. So we it's in final phase about 20 to 25 laws that we are going to go push through the parliament. So, and then we will be able to fulfill all the technically, of course, closing provisions for next 20 chapters that we are planning to close. Actually, this is not real utopia. This is the document, Barometer 26, that Montenegrin government design and tailor with European Commission as a fast track towards EU. Of course, the final words will have member states, but of course what we would expect from Montenegro, we really like merit-based system. We do our best to fulfill our criteria, but also we would really like and fight for fair and transparent process of integration. Last but not the least, US and the Western Balkans. So yes, we are experiencing trade war, but for Albania and Montenegro, US applies tariffs of only 10%, and for rest of the Western Balkan region is 33-35. So it could be very, very significant economic opportunity and a push for these 2 countries because they can be important gateways to regional trade with the US market. So I will close with this picture right now, but of course I'm here for the questions.
So the picture is that Montenegro really followed the procedure, did its homework and so on. So, and you all that you described and mentioned, but still, yeah, still not good enough. Frustration?
Yes, of course. That's what I say. Of course, we are deeply frustrated Western Balkans. I'm full of confidence telling you this, but still deep inside I still doubt. So we recently had a conference in the Brussels, so I have contact with one official highly ranked in the European Commission who worked partially 15 years ago in EU delegation, and we had the meeting and the lunch, and he told me, you know, you are going to be part of European Union. You are a professor. You have to teach and actually spread that positive notion to your students. So let's believe. And somehow we have to negotiate still with Dutch and France. That's the only two small items, but we are there. Thank you.
Yeah. So, Kristi, do we have this geopolitical or moment where geopolitics can actually perhaps meet Montenegro? Or how does it look from your position?
So thank you first of all to DIIS for organizing this event, for hosting TEPSA. Happy to be here and talk about enlargement and geopolitics. So when my country joined with the Big Bang enlargement in 2004, it was the normative arguments that prevailed. It was all about securing democracy and freedom and human rights and rule of law in Central and Eastern Europe. Security was left to NATO, but even in the NATO enlargement, the same normative arguments were really the most persuasive ones that in the end convinced all the member states to embark on enlargement. While the logic of geopolitics in these times was supposed to belong to the history and not to the future of Europe. And here we are in 2025, geopolitics is back with a vengeance, and enlargement is back on the top of EU agenda. In 2022, when the full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russia happened, the EU did respond with a number of steps that actually made the EU much more of a geopolitical actor. The EU did enter this conflict over the future of European order, where Russia was challenging and wishing to actually break the post-Cold War security order in Europe. And in this situation, the EU very clearly took the side of Ukraine in a violent geopolitical conflict against a major power. So this was something unprecedented for the European Union. The EU started to provide extensive military assistance to Ukraine, in addition to economic and other forms of aid. It offered membership perspective on the ground that this was now a normative geopolitical necessity. And it also took a stance on the EU's future borders by saying Ukraine will become a member, we support Ukraine's territorial integrity, and all of this in a situation where actually the borders were being violently contested. So all of these were really big steps, but at the same time, the full-scale war in Ukraine did expose Europe's dependence on the US more than before. It was the United States that took the lead in responding to Russia's full-scale invasion, took the lead in providing military support to Ukraine, and then Europeans gradually followed up and increased their contribution. Then we come to 2025, Donald Trump becoming president of the United States once again. And I have been really kind of surprised to see that for many European countries, especially Western European countries, this has been a bigger shock than the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. But now this sense that the US might actually abandon Europe is something that has started a whole new process in our discussions about Europe taking more responsibility for its security and defense, Unfortunately, Europe didn't start to do enough after February 2022, although there were, of course, some new efforts made, but we needed yet another shock. And so now we are in a situation where we still have this dependence of European security on the US. We also have the war in Ukraine continuing, and we have Russia as a long-term security threat to Europe. We all agree on that. Quite a set of challenges. So in this geopolitical environment, the EU is trying to move ahead with the enlargement process, saying that this is necessary for European security and indeed in order to really achieve security and stability in the current candidate countries, Ukraine, Moldova, also the Western Balkans, we need to complete the enlargement process. But then, although we repeat this argument of geopolitical necessity, I think there are many hurdles on the way of actually completing successfully this supposedly geopolitical enlargement. And one is that the EU is still not a fully fledged geopolitical actor on its own. We discussed it also in the previous session. The EU is still far from able to take responsibility for its own security. And then looking at Ukraine in particular, the EU does not have the kind of capability and also, I would say, the political will needed to decisively push for an end to the war. It is not able to provide Ukraine with security guarantees, which will be necessary for EU enlargement to actually be possible. First, we need to solve these questions and the war, offer security guarantees to Ukraine. That's where we have then different coalitions of the willing stepping in, and hopefully we will see more leadership on the side of the big European countries, but then also some coalitions of smaller countries. Denmark has been mentioned positively as one of the pioneers in supporting Ukraine. The Nordic Baltic countries are, I think, a strong regional grouping. So we really need to work hard to actually make Europe, first of all, capable of addressing these geopolitical hurdles before we can confidently move on with the enlargement process. And also a further challenge is that it was mentioned before, many citizens of the EU don't actually buy this geopolitical argument. And this is also something that our political leaders need to work on. Why is it that the accession of Ukraine or Western Balkan countries is necessary for the future of European security? I don't really hear these arguments very well across Europe. And we still approach the question of Ukraine's accession more as a matter of Ukraine knocking on the door, and then we have all these conditions which Ukraine has to meet. So we have this formal accession process, and I'm not arguing against the necessity for having these accession criteria, but then we also need to have a new framework for talking about enlargement, where we need to recognize that in future, and especially now that the US does intend to reduce its commitment to Europe, Europe will need Ukraine for its defense in the long term in order for Europeans to be able to push back the Russian threat and to create credible deterrence and defense against Russia. We need to have Ukraine on our side with their defense industry, with their experienced military, also with their strong political will and understanding of what is at stake geopolitically. So let me conclude by stressing that enlargement in the current geopolitical environment, it has to move ahead with a parallel process of the EU and Europe, I mean the EU also together with non-EU European countries, becoming still a much stronger geopolitical actor so that it can resolve the geopolitical hurdles to enlargement, and then also gradually take over the US role in European security. And this was also raised in the previous panel, that indeed the US has made it very clear that they intend to reduce their commitments. But for the time being, let's remember, NATO is still there. That is still the framework for European defense. What the EU is doing, and when you read the white paper, it's all written in the way that EU defense initiatives are complementary to NATO. And then it's up to member states to look at the NATO capability targets, look at the EU instruments, and then do what they can to strengthen European capabilities. That is what is needed. And Europeans need to take leadership in NATO. They need to take leadership in addressing the war in Ukraine, providing security guarantees for Ukraine, and then keeping in sight this long-term prospect of actually integrating candidate countries to Europe. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Before I move on to questions, there's one big dilemma here, and that's the geopolitical moment, the necessity, and then what Saskia talked about, the mandate from European populations, and you also addressed this, Kristi, which is an ongoing issue here. And then I was actually, if I may, I take the liberty here, being the moderator, also because Europe needs Ukraine for its defense. For you and me, Baltic Sea countries, of course. But how does it look from, for instance, colleagues in Spain, Portugal, Italy? Would that, I mean, is that the same feeling?
I suppose it's really a question to our Western and Southern European colleagues here. But I think we are in a new stage in this discussion now. And this real sense that the US may actually abandon Europe, this has provoked a new discussion. So we need to take a completely fresh look at what we mean by European strategic autonomy. In the past, we have had a lot of words, but much less actions. Now we are in a situation where we have the NATO defense plans. That is still the only credible thing that we have for European defense. And then we have this prospect that the US wants to reduce its presence. So we need to have this very practical exercise of thinking through. So, okay, how do we Europeans replace? Well, the urgent task is to replace the US aid to Ukraine, but then also to replace gradually what the US does for European defense. And how does it concern then all these countries that are geographically further away from Russia and Ukraine? Obviously, if the EU as an institution will fail, and if it will be at some point one of the member states will be attacked, and then the EU is not able to respond and to defend its members, then I'm afraid it's going to be the end of the EU. And I don't need to explain that this will have very severe consequences for all of Europe.
And maybe I can add to that, because in the Netherlands you see a division and you also see it changing a bit. If you would ask it 1 year ago, then you wouldn't feel that urgency. I think now it's changing, but I think not many people have this resilience package in their homes. I think it is like 10-15% that has it. I don't know the numbers, so don't pick no numbers, but not many people have it. So we don't feel the threat that much. But now with the sabotage on the North Sea, it's changing a bit. It's in our news a lot. So you see it shifting, but it's quite late. So.
Okay, I will. I think that your minister said that strategic framework of the global world is changing, and of course strategic framework of the European Union is changing, and for me it looks that we all have to have new lenses or to see it in many different shades. And okay, you mentioned South partners, Portugal, Spain, but finally, okay, not maybe finally, but they faced one day cut of electricity, water supplies, and probably it pushed them thinking, is it really about just technical thing, or it is part of this global change of strategic environment, probably some cyber attacks from geopolitics, so that they can put them more in to think that maybe they are not just isolated island and the things will hit them. And tourism season is coming, so we all worry.
All right, so I invite questions from the public. I know we have sit up here from Barcelona, so of course I would be curious about whether they have an answer. So if I start with the Funda, and the next one, so I...
Funda Tekin, Institut für Europäische Politik in Berlin. So thank you for this very interesting panel and really touching upon all the different aspects and all the dilemmas actually that we're facing. And I would have also actually asked the question, Kristi, with regards to the geographical issue. And I think we really need to link that also to the, to the public support, because of course we experts might actually, have the threat perceptions and be more aware of the general context. And I was also thinking, this is a question to you, Saskia, with regards when the minister said this morning that in Denmark public opinion is now very in favor of enlargement. I was wondering, how does that look like in 2 years maybe, because also in Germany there was a very positive movement in summer 2022. It has dissolved by now again, so I think this is really something that we have to keep in mind with regards to public opinion. But my question would also go to or comment and question to Danijela, because you said when you hear all those, concepts of gradual integration, staged accession, you basically hear no membership. And of course, I can understand that feeling, and also, knowing that Turkey does not like the term privileged partnership, although I think that privileged partnership is a different concept than staged accession. I really think we might need to turn the narrative around here, because if it's a merit-based approach, and the process is so long, I think staged accession could actually also help, make the candidate countries feel the progress. So if you have really progress and reforms, and then also move closer to the European Union in terms of staged accession, or gradual integration, it depends then on the concept. This is really then that you feel the merit, and that might actually help really also then building up the trust in the process again. So for me, it's more a positive connotation to that. And I was just wondering whether you could also relate to that, or whether you really think that and this maybe also then links back to the cherries that that Ian was hinting at. If you then really get the cherries for having progress, I think it might help the process.
So we take another one next to Funda.
Thank you very much. Ilkov Teuger, Director of Global Policy Center, Madrid, Spain. Also, maybe I can just start with one quick sentence on the southern perspective on this. Of course, the geopolitical urgency or the sense of failure of security is not the same in Spain and in Estonia. This is very clear. But I think this doesn't necessarily mean that, for example, Spanish citizens are not on board in advancing, deepening European security architecture, or rethinking a European pillar in NATO, or trying to discuss that. I know Spain is more on the headlines about the defense spending conversations because of the nature of the government. So that's just politics, because it's Social Democrats plus further left. So this is what we have at this point in time. But this doesn't change the fact that Spain, both the government and at the citizenry level, supports further integration. But I think there's also one important point that is made in the Spanish policy space that I would like to transmit, is that spending more at the national level does not add up to a more integrated European defense. And this is one of the very important speaking points in Spain. So it's the discussion shouldn't be only about increasing defense spending. Of course, this is more urgent and important, but it's not the only component granting us the possibility and capability of defending us in 2030, as your minister said. So after this mini intervention, here's my question for Kristi.
That's great.
Because this is, I think we have come a long way, even like 4 months since Donald Trump took office. Because in the beginning, my sense was like the Nordics and the Baltics are more trying to stick to the status quo, not letting the United States go, while the rest of the Europeans, starting with France, but not limited to, trying to rethink European security architecture as a whole. Now, from your comments and then from your conference back in Tallinn last week, I understand that we are actually converging in accepting Americans will go. We just need to buy time, and in the meantime, find a credible way to replace not just the forces, but also intelligence, even start thinking about nuclear umbrella. So my question is, the European security architecture was done with the Americans, even by the Americans after the Second World War. We rediscussed this after the end of the Cold War and stayed in the same structure. Now, for me, there is a new opportunity to revisit this and fit this to 21st century. And this should be done with the Americans, actually, but realistically assuming that they will withdraw, and they will withdraw with all the elements possible in 5 to 10 years. How do we do that? What should be the steps that are taken by the EU and other European coalitions of the willing to make this orderly phase out from the American commitments? It can be a European NATO, but if that's so, how are we going to take over the command structures, the force structures, the intelligence structures, etc.? Do we have a plan for this? Because for me, it is the real question facing us for guaranteeing a European security architecture that works for all the countries in the continent. Thank you.
Are you taking notes? I have 4 more, and I think I'm going to take 1 more over here. Yes, exactly. And then back to you, and then with the free rest.
Thank you so much for your presentations. I'm intern at the Austrian Embassy in Copenhagen here. And my question is to Saskia. It's about the Copenhagen dilemma. Because the problem is that Copenhagen criteria are they do set a very high standard of rule of law. The problem is that this only goes for candidate countries, whereas after accession, there is no proper mechanism how to keep those rule of law standards which were set before. Especially when many of the EU rule of law toolbox are considered weak or just like soft law, kind of like the rule of law report. And how can the EU face the Copenhagen dilemma in the regards of the rule of law?
Okay, back to you. Who will go first?
I can go first.
Yes, you go, Saskia.
I think there were 2 questions addressed to me. First, the question of by Funda. No, I think that the Danish minister was quite positive, also about Danish public opinion. The last Eurobarometer, it's around 61%, 60%, so it's not really high. There's a majority, but of course, the Eurobarometer does not make a difference between Ukraine and the other candidate countries, and I think there's a big difference here. Also in Denmark, I assume. In the Netherlands, there's a big difference. There's still 70% in favor of Ukraine accession, but really below 50% for all the rest of the candidates. Turkey even, really low. So I think, there's a very big difference. And I think the interesting thing is with public opinion that enlargement is not very salient in a lot of current member states, in the Western member states, but it can become salient once populist right parties will take this up, and it will especially happen when there will be a referendum. So this is the concern. So politicians can say, okay, it's not really a salient issue, let's not discuss it, let's depoliticize it, but it will be politicized once there will be a referendum. So that's really my concern. And then the other question about the Copenhagen dilemma, I think you really summarized the dilemma quite well. I'm a little bit more positive than you are about the instruments that the EU has now, especially considering the next MFF. If this budget conditionality will still be part of it and even extended, then I think the EU has a strong instrument. At least when it's applied consistently. So that's what I mentioned in my kickoff. That now it's really to attack Hungary, but it should also be to tackle like the smaller scale attacks on the media, on journalists, on judges. And I think it's not done that properly now. But the instruments are there, and it's so much better than we had before. So I'm a little bit more optimistic than you are.
Danijela?
Okay. Montenegro is really focused to full membership, no doubt. So no even a word in Montenegro, in political or public opinion, that we are talking about stage, not even in the region. Maybe very often European or member states accuse us that there is no regional cooperation. We are very, very solidar. We stick together, and Montenegro probably, if it's going to be full member state first, I of course strongly cheer for that. Probably followed with Albania a few years. We will support very strongly integration of all Western Balkan countries on the same term, sharing with our expertise, our knowledge, our enlargement way, not only with them, as similar as we are replicating Slovenia, Croatian enlargement process and closing provisions. Probably all the rest of the country of the region can use all our framework. And of course, we support strongly accession of Moldova and Ukraine. So I think that last week your minister said that was last week in Podgorica. No, Monday and Tuesday, and last week it was President of European Council, and I think that in Min there was a President of Moldova and probably Zelensky. We are all signing this contract agreement of understanding to deliver everything what we have done in enlargement process to those countries to speed up the process.
All right. Kristi?
Yes, thank you. So both Funda and Ilkka were kind of asking about the same issue, of course, to what extent we still have this difference between Northeast and South. I would say on threat perceptions, one more thing we haven't discussed so much yet is the non-military threats and all the so-called hybrid attacks by Russia, the threat of sabotage, attacks against infrastructure, disinformation campaigns. That is something we see all over Europe. And I'm amazed that often I still get questions from Western European colleagues kind of assuming that in the Baltic states we are much more exposed or getting much more of that. But no, actually it's not the case. Nowadays we are getting less of that. And I think it's above all the big European countries, Germany, France, that are the main targets because their position is decisive and their support to Ukraine is decisive. And of course, preferably Russia would break European unity and break our organizations without without a single shoot, just with non-military methods. That's what they are using against all of us. And the goal, of course, is to change the European security order and to have recognition to the Russian sphere of influence and the very principles of European security. Now, what is new currently is that the US, to some extent, seems to share the Russian view of security order, right? And even if the US is still there in NATO and hasn't withdrawn so far and still has its troops here and provides the collective defense, my sense is that it's kind of doing it for the wrong reasons. It's no more about defending our shared values and defending the European security order the way we want to defend it. But it's now all about this geopolitical competition. And having said that, I mean, still, Ilke, we have maybe come closer to some extent, but the countries in the Baltic Sea region are still doing everything possible to keep the US engaged as long as possible, because we don't have any other option. It takes years for Europeans to build up the capabilities that are needed to replace the US. So in our view, Europe should not do anything to push the US away. We are just getting this message now so clearly from the Americans that they plan withdrawal. So the best possible scenario is then to do this withdrawal in a managed, gradual way, rather than with a big drama and shock and suddenly leaving us all vulnerable. So this is now the positive scenario. And where also I would say in our region the views have not changed at all is that NATO is the framework for European defense. Now it's all about strengthening the European pillar and having the same command and control structures, the same defense plans that we have, but taking a bigger role for Europeans in these structures. And then we will see, maybe one day it actually leads to Europeans taking over most of the functions, but that's a bit too early to predict. But what the EU defense is about, it's a bit different role. It's about defense industry, strengthening the capabilities, and then of course the integration part of it, which indeed it's really necessary. Even if we leave the EU aside, for NATO it's also necessary. For Europeans to be able to meet the NATO capability targets, European countries need to do much more together, multinational projects, EU-level investment. Otherwise, we will never get to the sufficient level of capabilities. And that's where the EU then steps in. And of course, I agree that just looking at the percentage of spending is not enough or not quite adequate. It just happens to be the only thing that President Trump is interested in. And so in order to keep the US engaged for the time being, we have to somehow show that the figures are changing. But what matters is the real capabilities that Europeans need to develop in cooperation.
Thank you so much, Kristi. So now I have 4 people on my list over here, and Peter and German guy and Jim. Sorry. Yeah.
Thank you.
Please, and please
my
introduce
name is Andrea Etető. I'm coming from Hungary, and I would like to have a comment on Hungary and focusing on Hungary. So I understand that the European Commission had lots of things to do, and Trump and the USA and lots of turbulences, but I still think that in the meantime you still do not really focus enough on Hungary, because the situation has got worsened a lot in Hungary. And I'm not exaggerating, perhaps you think, but no, I think Orban is a Russian agent, and he does everything to destabilize the Balkans. And, you know, some days ago, the Hungarian spies were arrested in Ukraine and spying for Russia and things like that. And he cooperates with Dodik. He finances the Romanian far-right guy who hates anyway the Hungarian minorities. So much to the bullshit of protecting Hungarian minority. And the new civil law they are planning to accept is worse than in Georgia. So anybody who anytime who receives EU money, for example, Horizon project, can be a foreign agent and dangerous for the country. And also the history against Ukraine is pulled up to a very high level. So media sources and people were listed to spread Ukrainian propaganda, which means that they spoke sympathetically about the Ukrainian victims. That's the Ukrainian propaganda, they say. So it is a very dirty thing which is coming, and because Orban feels that he loses popularity very much, so he will try everything and he will do everything. So I would suggest to the Commission, if they have instruments, to apply it now and apply it strongly, take away the veto right and take away the agricultural money or anything they can, because anyway it will be too late. And I'm not sure that the elections will take place next year, because anything can happen anytime. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Really, thank you. Over here, I'm going to keep you 5 more minutes so everybody has a chance to either make a comment or ask a question.
Thank you. My name is Peter Ries from the Parliamentary Department, and thank you to the organizers and the panelists for super topical presentations. This year, 30 year after Dayton, I'm happy to focus on Western Balkan as well. And unfortunately, some of the countries in the region are very much dominated by internal cleavages, not least Bosnia-Herzegovina. And do the European Union have the sufficient instruments to deal with such problems? Or who can assist in this case? Can Montenegro assist? Do we still rely upon the US to make a deal in Bosnia-Herzegovina? Or how do we move on? I'll assist a group of parliamentarians in a visit to Sarajevo in a few weeks. So in case you have some kind of key message to me, I'll be utmost grateful. Thank you.
Super, excellent. Thank you, Peter. And then my friend from Germany. Sorry.
Well, thank you very much. Last time I looked at my passport, I was still Austrian.
Oh, sorry.
But that's okay.
Sorry. Well, that's a very...
That's okay, don't worry. Don't worry, I know you're Dutch, probably.
So just tell me your name again.
Yes, I'm still Paul Schmidt from the Austrian Society for European Politics. Here comes my question. Saskia, thank you. I think you very rightly mentioned public opinion. Now, Saskia, the question to you. Imagine I was a very anti-EU enlargement politician from the Netherlands, from Austria, from wherever. You fly back to Amsterdam now, you meet him in the airport, no television cameras on, and you talk about the panel here. And he asks you, what does enlargement have to do with security? Why couldn't we have a much closer cooperation in terms of security without enlargement? What would be your answer? How would you convince him? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paul from Austria. Yes, I know, I'm going to try. I work on it. Sorry. Jim, you will have the last comment, question, whatever.
Yes,
Help me
I
out.
take it that you are Swedish. Oh, sorry.
But that's normal with my name.
10
that
seconds.
happens all the time.
Really 10 seconds, a methodological question, because I think there's some misunderstanding, Danijela. You seem to oppose staged accession to full membership. That's not at all the way I see things. Staged accession is an instrument to reach full enlargement. You can't oppose the two. If you oppose the two, there will be no integration. So it's an instrument which helps you get into full integration. Sorry.
All right, thank you so much. And then we will have your final comments here. And before closing, keep your seats, because I promised my colleague Mikkel Runge Olsen, who's been in charge, so been part of a TEPSA publication, and he wants to make an announcement before we move to the French Embassy. Please, the word is yours.
Shall I start again? Maybe to start with the last question, and because I'm really challenged by this question, I think it's a very, very good question. I think it depends pretty much on which anti-enlargement politician you ask. There are many in the Netherlands, but my answer would be to, like, if it's not coming from the populist right, that security is really important for our values, and this is really what's at stake. And I think this is sinking in the Netherlands. And I think we are still coming into grips with the fact that the US is withdrawing. We were really shocked about that still.
But I think now there's really much at stake. The Ukraine is fighting for our values. So I think that resonates also with the anti-enlargement parties on the right, as long as it's not the radical right, because they don't care about these EU values that much. That would be a little bit my cynical answer. But I'm very much open to suggestions, because as I said, there are many anti-enlargement, or not anti, but enlargement skeptic politicians in the Netherlands, in the center as well. And maybe about Hungary, I couldn't agree more with what you were saying. I'm afraid that the EU is giving up on Hungary, that we don't take Orban seriously anymore, and that we think that we can do without Hungary, and which of course for the Hungarians is dramatic. And I also think that the money was released. Part of the money was released way too soon. That was, of course, a political issue, political argument, and that's why I'm really pleading for more consistent use and a more transparent use of these instruments. And I also think that they should apply to much more funds, also which really hits Hungary. But of course, the difficult issue with this is those instruments also affect the people. So of course it affects the corrupt politicians, but it also affects the people. So I also understand that the Commission is a bit cautious, but I agree with you that I share your worries.
Me? So okay, gradual. It's how to say. It's to find balance. So there is demand and supply for enlargement. If we set it here, balance it here. But if we at least try to put demand for enlargement there, maybe we will push balance somewhere among these, and that's very low. It's economic, it's bargaining. I would just like to address your question, asking direct solution for everything. And I very often, when I face with that question, would like to answer. If I would have that answer, I wouldn't be here. I would be professor. I would be retired at Caribbean in the yacht. So that's the answer. $1 million. Kristi?
Yes, very quickly. First on Hungary. I think the sense in the EU is now that we just have so much on our plate, like huge issues, that we just try to find ways to move ahead without Hungary. And it's like really sad, and I do hope that there are then still people and processes that actually deal with the question of Hungary and the question of rule of law, and how the EU can in future do better in possible similar situations. But indeed, now it's all about circumventing and moving ahead without or despite Hungary's opposition. And I have noticed also that Hungary is really making a campaign against Ukraine's membership with very dubious arguments. So this is then a challenge also for all of us to have our counter-arguments and our own calculations, and this discussion in the EU is also still only starting, like what then actually are all the budgetary and institutional and other implications of Ukraine's accession. So Hungary comes with its arguments which are really, I think, outrageous and not really accurate at all, but we need to have then very good responses on our side. And then very quickly on security and why not cooperate on security without enlargement. Well, there is a real threat that these candidate countries turn against us if the EU fails to respond to their aspiration to become members. They have applied for membership. And just look at Georgia as a warning example of what may happen when the Georgians feel that they have been let down and the EU is not really serious about integrating them. And so now we have Georgia turning towards Russia instead, with really dangerous geopolitical consequences for Europe. Thanks.
I wanted to thank my panel or the panelist here, but I fear that if we do that before Mikkel does his very short presentation, you will all leave. So please, stay put, and Mikkel, just make your announcement, and then we will give you a big applause.
Yes. Okay. I'll just hijack the floor for shameless commercial, so to speak. This being a TEPSA conference and everything, I thought it was fitting to highlight a new TEPSA publication. It's edited by Michael Keating, Johannes Pollock, and Paul Schmidt. And Paul Schmidt is down here.
From Austria.
Yes. I am but a lowly co-author of the Danish chapter, but I just wanted to highlight that this United States and the Future of Europe has gathered a bunch of authors from all over Europe to write chapters about their country and transatlantic relations. So very, very timely. If you haven't picked it up, please do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you to our excellent panel. Thank you. And thank you to you, all the questions. Thank you to my panel, Saskia, Danijela, and Kristi. Thank you so much. We will now close this afternoon here at DIIS, at the Institute. Andreas asked me to say that we have to move out quite quickly from the room because they will have to reorganize the room for tomorrow's session. Thank you so much. Thank you for your excellent questions from everybody and for being part of this. We see each other at the French Embassy downtown Copenhagen. You know how to get there, or there's a plan for that? I assume, yes. Excellent. Super. Great. Thanks. Thank you.